Hello, hockey fans, and welcome to a new episode of Anatomy of a Season, a show where we look at a team's given season, the build-up of the roster, the events that led up to it, and of course, the season itself. During the 2025-26 NHL season we're currently in the midst of, we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of these three original six franchises, the Red Wings, the Blackhawks, and the Rangers, all rich with history and legacy. And I figure it's only right we start looking at some of the moments of those teams. And in this video, we're going to focus on the New York Rangers, who had glory and triumph, a loyal fan base, many iconic players, and housed one of the most infamous arenas in the entire world, Madison Square Garden. Yeah, it'd be great to look at that memorable team in 1972, or the glory of 1994, or even 1940. And indeed in this video, we're not doing any of that. We're actually going to look at the New York Rangers on their 50th anniversary season in 1975-76. Look at this picture. Well, hey, they actually look pretty happy. Probably because this was taken when this season was over. And they were relieved. Yeah, to be honest, it's not as if things were expected to be overly this bad, but certain decisions made had a long-lasting effect. Well, it's now time for a backstory. The Rangers were founded in 1926 as Tech Ricard, the owner of the Madison Square Garden, was awarded a franchise for the 1926-27 season as competition for the New York Americans. The Rangers quickly became a monster success in the region and won a Stanley Cup by their second season in 1928. They were built on the success of the breadline, Bill Cook, Bun Cook, and Frank Boucher, all whom became Hall of Famers. And of course the team was put together by a hockey visionary in Lester Patrick, who also coached the club. They made the Stanley Cup appearances in 1929 and 1932, and win their second in their history in 1933. The Rangers had a seesaw of a time the rest of the decade and didn't appear in the Stanley Cup until the 1939-40 season. While Patrick stayed on as GM, Boucher was now the team's head coach, and turned this Rangers club into a champion. A team that was stacked to the gills. Future Hall of Famers Brian Hextall, Neil Colville, Art Coulter, Babe Pratt, Clint Smith, and Lester's son Lynn Patrick. But then something happened from 1943 to 1947. They missed the playoffs 5 straight times. Lester Patrick was out. Frank Boucher was promoted to GM by 1946. He worked hard to make the team formidable again. And despite a losing record, in 1950, they did make it to the Stanley Cup Final and took the powerful Red Wings to 7 games that would ultimately lose. Great players such as Chuck Rayner, Alan Stanley, Buddy O'Connor, and Ed Lepard would made up a never-say-die team. But the rest of the 1950s didn't exactly pan out too well for the Rangers. Including the Cup final appearance in 1950, they only made the playoffs 4 times. Their only saving grace, the Rangers were simply awful. The Blackhawks were actually atrocious. But at least going into the 1960s, things looked promising for Chicago. Muzz Patrick had taken over as GM in 1955, another one of Lester's sons. It's sad because the Rangers in this era did have one of the best players in the game in superstar right wing Andy Bathgate, who won the Hart Trophy as league MVP in the 1958-59 season. And they had eccentric yet ever so popular future Hall of Famer Gump Worsley as their goaltender. And there looked to be some hope on the horizon as the Rangers made the playoffs in 1962 despite a losing record, and they also added all-time great defenseman Doug Harvey to their lineup. And they had a new prospect join their team. A product of Lac Saint-Jean, Quebec, Jean Rattel. Developed by the Guelph Royals of the OHA, he scored 40 goals and 61 assists for 101 points in just 47 games in the 1960-61 season. Also, he was called up to play 3 games for the Rangers that year and had 3 points. A true class gentleman with passion for the game and a highly skilled playmaker who could make magic happen with big finesse and style to go with it. And while the Rangers would lose to eventual Cup champions Leafs in the playoffs, at least there was a glimmer of hope, as another top prospect was about to join the team in the 1962-63 season. And that was another product out of Quebec, Montreal-born Rod Gilbert, who some felt wouldn't make it big due to his not being overly sizable, and he had speed, however, and a booming shot. And he could get gritty and work the boards when he had to. He, like Rattel, developed his skills in Guelph with the Royals, and he and Rattel were a dynamic duo in that 1960-61 season where Gilbert had 54 goals and 49 assists for 103 points in 47 games. He spent the 1961-62 season mainly with the Kitchener-Waterloo Beavers, notching 23 points in 21 games. He's also played 1 game each for the Rangers in the prior 2 seasons, and he does have an assist to show for it. But the Rangers missed the playoffs in 1962-63. They had a terrible season, and the fan base was growing ever so tired of Muzz Patrick's ineptitude to build a contending team. After years of frustration on both sides, after the season, the Rangers decided they'd had enough of goaltender Gump Worsley in what was one of the biggest trades in NHL history at the time. They sent the Gumper to the Habs along with Len Ronson, Leon Rochefort, and Dave Ballin for Phil Goyette, Don Marshall, and megastar goaltender, six-time Vezina winner, and former Hart Trophy winners League MVP Jacques Plante. At the time, Habs fans were furious about this trade. Rangers fans loved the Gumper, but even they were starting to tire of him. Nobody would have thought at the time that Montreal would actually get any good out of this deal. But in 1963-64, it seemed neither team did at the time. The Habs were still a very good team, but the Gumper spent most of the year in the minors. The Rangers, on the other hand, had a terrible year. Plante was a bust, and while the Rangers had a great defenseman in Harry Howell, the defense as a whole was apples and oranges from what Plante had in Montreal. Rattel was having severe injury and consistency issues. It looked like he was about to be written off for good. Goyette did play very well, however, and so did Gilbert, and they had a new prospect in vicious Vic Hadfield at left wing. But a sledgehammer hit Rangers fans on February 22nd, 1964 during that season. They traded Andy Bathgate, along with veteran Don McKenney, to the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for prospect Bill Collins, who wouldn't play a single game for the Rangers, at least not now. We'll hear a bit more from him later. Minor league defensemen Arnie Brown and Rod Sealing, winger Bob Nevin, and what many consider the meat and potatoes of the trade, Dick Duff. Rangers fans were angry, as Bathgate is clearly one of the most iconic Rangers players of all time. But with the Leafs, he got his name on the Stanley Cup that very same year. Bathgate scored 2 game-winning goals in the Stanley Cup final, especially a key one in Game 4. However, many experts and pundits feel, despite that, Bathgate was never truly fit in with Toronto for a long-term plan, and it turned out to be true. It's not like fans hated him, he just seemed to get drowned under other star players. And also, they feel he was never truly the same player after the trade, which definitely holds validity. Finally, the Rangers organization had enough of Muzz Patrick and dismissed him, and they wanted a focused hockey mind to take control of this club. And that's why, for the 1964-65 season, they hired assistant GM Emile the Cat Francis. He's going to take charge of this team. Francis was only 38 years old when he took this position, a very young role for a GM at the time. Some criticized the move, feeling the Rangers were in over their head. Francis was a successful junior and minor league player with 95 NHL games played as a goaltender. However, he was also the coach of the Guelph Royals during the tenures of Rattel and Gilbert. Little did they know, this was the smartest and best GM they'd have on this club since Lester Patrick. Francis was wasting no time, as it was looking like the Bathgate trade was going to be a bust, as Dick Duff was not producing very well. In December 1964, he traded him to the Habs for winger Bill Hickey, and to be honest, this was not one of the better moves on Francis's part, as Hickey wouldn't do all that great, and Duff, along with Gumper, went on to win 4 Stanley Cups with the Habs. Gumper also won 2 Vezina trophies as well, and mentored future Hall of Fame goaltender Rogie Vachon. In the 1964-65 season, things didn't get any better. Plante was sent to the minor leagues and actually retired after the season, being very discouraged with his run in New York. Gilbert, however, had an excellent season, and younger players were developing. In 1965-66, a new goalie joined the club, and that was 26-year-old Eddie Giacomin, a product of Sudbury, Ontario. He has spent the last 5 full seasons playing with the Providence Red of the AHL. He didn't have an overly stellar record. He finished with a record of 109, 129, and 10, and a not-so-good 4.38 goals against average. But, again, for context, the Reds were not a very good team, but he did accumulate 12 shutouts in that time. But Francis apparently liked what he saw, liked his work ethic, and gave him a spot. But the Rangers were even worse in 1965-66. Gilbert missed most of the season due to injury, the only bright spots being Nevin proved to be a win in the Dick Duff deal, and Rattel looked like he was coming into his own. But the 1966 amateur draft with a 2nd overall pick, Francis made a splash. And it was drafting Toronto Marlies defenseman Brad Park. Feeling he was the future of this Rangers defense, this young, hungry, pugnacious man with great offensive skill and stick handling was something that has been impressing scouts since his days in Junior B. This is huge for the Rangers, but he's still a couple years away from the NHL. And then something crazy happened in the 1966-67 season. Emile Francis also took over as permanent head coach, and the Rangers got good! They finished 30, 28, and 12 for 72 points, and made the playoffs for the first time since 1962. They would lose to favored two-time defending Cup champion Habs, however, in a sweep. But at long last, fans were cheering at the Garden rather than groaning. Giacomin had a great year in net, was named a first-team All-Star, getting votes over Blackhawks legend Glenn Hall. Harry Howell was also a team All-Star and won the Norris Trophy as top defenseman. Don Marshall was a second-team All-Star. Phil Goyette made the top 10 in scoring, while Gilbert had a comeback season from injury. However, Rattel was hurt this year. Francis was implementing a conservative yet effective coaching style, emphasizing puck control, sound positional hockey, and a focus on defense. He was strict yet fair and put a heavy emphasis on teamwork. The 1967-68 season saw hockey was truly alive in New York again. The passion of the Rangers fans had been its highest since the Bathgate days, and even rivaling the early years of the team. This was a team to get excited about. Gilbert and Rattel had become an amazing duo, and about to become better than ever. They were 4th and 5th in NHL scoring respectively. Gilbert was named a second-team All-Star. Phil Goyette had a tremendous year with 65 points. Defenseman Jim Nielsen evolved into a premier blue liner, and was named second-team All-Star. Harry Howell still produced very well, and Eddie Giacomin had become one of the most popular Rangers on the team. Fans filled the Garden with chants of Eddie, Eddie, Eddie. With his flamboyant play and epic save-making, he was named a second-team All-Star. Remember, this is also the year that the NHL expanded from 6 to 12 teams, and despite leaving Rod Sealing unprotected in the expansion draft, he was going to be an asset going forward on defense as they reacquired him. But the Rangers couldn't get it done in the playoffs. Chicago beat them in 6 games. And the Rangers were ready to add a new addition to this club for the 68-69 season, and that's Walt Tkachuk, a two-way center who will no doubt lend more depth to the Rangers. He has been in the Rangers system for quite some time, since 1963 as a matter of fact, as a member of the OHA Kitchener Rangers since he was a teenager. A grinding forward who can also find his way to the net. During his time at Kitchener, he notched 78 goals, 141 assists for 219 points in 175 games. His 1967-68 season saw him score 37 goals, 56 assists for 93 points in 52 games. And also, great news, Brad Park will be joining the roster this season. The Rangers had another epic season in 1968-69. Despite Hall of Fame player Bernie Geoffrion starting the season as head coach, he didn't last, but Francis retook the reins and led them back in the right direction. The team finished 41-26-9 for 91 points. This was the season where the now infamous goal-a-game line took charge, with Rattel, Gilbert, and Hatfield with 78, 77, and 66 points respectively, as well as 32, 28, and 26 goals respectively. Brad Park was a finalist for the Calder Trophy as league's top rookie. Giacomin was still an ace in net, but here was the problem. The Rangers were in a division with the powerful Habs, and the Bruins had now passed them in terms of their growth, and have become a dominant force themselves, and the playoff woes continues. The Habs swept the Rangers out with relative ease. This was frustrating to Emile Francis, who built a tremendously talented team, but changes clearly still need to be made. The Rangers were excellent on special teams, but wanted to improve their penalty kill just a little bit. So they added former Brandon Wheat Kings Jr. superstar Bill Fairbairn, who spent the last couple seasons with the minor league Omaha Knights. During his time with the Knights, he notched 51 goals, 80 assists for 131 points in 138 games. 28 goals and 47 assists came in the 1968-69 season for 75 points. And Fairbairn had a tremendous year, and now he gets a shot at the bigs. The 1969-70 season was an exciting one, and it did, however, prove the league definitely needed a divisional realignment or at least a new playoff format. The Rangers actually clinched the playoffs at the end of the season with 92 points, tied with the Habs, who would miss out due to the tiebreaker rules. The Habs had a better record than the first-place Blues in the West. Either way, the Rangers did indeed finish 38, 22, and 16 for those 92 points. Park was a first-team All-Star. Giacomin was a second-team All-Star. Tkachuk was 5th in league scoring. Rattel was 6th. But in the playoffs, they ran into the big, bad Bruins, led by some guy named Bobby Orr, who built a really intense competitive rivalry with Brad Park, which really boiled over at times. The Bruins win it in 6. Rangers still fail in the playoffs. This rivalry with Boston hits a whole other level at this time, as the Bruins went on to win their first cup in 29 years. The Rangers currently sit at the longest active slump without a Stanley Cup win in 30 years. Longest slump without a playoff win, 20 years. But going into the 1970-71 season, Francis decides he's going to lighten the workload a bit for Eddie Giacomin and give Gilles Villemere, a longtime minor league star for the Buffalo Bisons of the AHL, more of a chance as a backup. And indeed, the Rangers got off to a great start in October of 1970, and Francis then made a deal on Halloween. The Rangers sent minor league defenseman Larry Brown to a desperate Red Wings club in exchange for right winger Pete Stemkowski. This was a good move. Stemmer brings aggression and depth to the Rangers core, and while his scoring abilities are not always consistent, he's considered an asset wherever he plays. He has scored 80 goals, 137 assists for 217 points in 391 games. That's nothing to sneeze at. He started his career with the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was actually very much key in the playoffs for their Stanley Cup win in 1967. He was part of that huge blockbuster Mahovlich-Ullman trade between the Leafs and Red Wings in 1968 and is coming off two of his best seasons of his career with the Red Wings. In 1969-70, he scored 25 goals, 24 assists for 49 points in 76 games, and he also accumulated 114 penalty minutes. And it was another great regular season for the Rangers in 1970-71. They finished with a record of 49, 18, and 11 for 109 points. Their best regular season in their history. Giacomin and Vilmer shared the Vezina Trophy, which I should contextualize back then was for the goaltenders who allowed the least goals, which is what the Jennings Trophy pretty much is today. Jean Rottel received the Bill Masterton Memorial Award for the player who best displays perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to the game of hockey, and he definitely embodied that spirit. 7 Rangers players reached 20 goals, including Rottel, Gilbert, and Tkachuk. Brad Park was a second-team All-Star for defensemen, and they finally won their first playoff series in 21 years, beating a very determined and talented Toronto Maple Leafs team in 6 games, before falling to Chicago, who is a very powerful team this year, in a thrilling 7-game series. At least it was progression, but Francis obviously wants the cup, and so does every player on this club. They seem to be inching closer to glory. In the 1971 draft, the Rangers made a pretty good pick at 10th overall, taking left winger Steve Vickers from the Toronto Marlies. A highly skilled scorer who adds what Francis likes, and that's defensive capabilities and a little bit of toughness, and will no doubt add even more substance to this club. His 2 seasons with the Marlies, Vickers notched 71 goals, 102 assists for 173 points. In the 1970-71 season alone, he scored 43 goals, 64 assists for 107 points in 62 games. He will spend the upcoming season, however, in Omaha. Also, the Rangers wanted to go with a defenseman in this draft as well, as they had the 13th overall pick and took Steve Durbano, who would never play a game for the Rangers. And another defenseman was taken 7 picks later, and some guy named Larry Robinson. Anyway, moving on. The 1971-72 season, however, was one for the ages for the Rangers. Ranger Mania was running wild in the Big Apple, and with this team it was easy to see why. 48 wins, 17 losses, 13 ties for a monster 109 points. Many felt this was a team that was gonna do it. This would be the team to reign atop the NHL and finally unseat either the Habs or Bruins. Jean Rottel had a storybook season, 46 goals, 63 assists for 109 points, 3rd in league scoring behind Oren Esposito of the Bruins. He won the Lady Byng Trophy for excellence in sportsmanship and the Lester B. Pearson Award, which is voted by the players of the league as league MVP. Hatfield had 50 goals and had 106 points and was a second-team All-Star, while Rod Gilbert and his 97 points got him a first-team All-Star selection. Speaking of which, so did defenseman Brad Park. Vilmer and Giacomin were great in net. Tkachuk, Fairbairn, and Stemmer made a great grinder line. This team was close to perfect. They beat out the defending champion Montreal Canadiens in 6 games. That was a huge one. They absolutely stunned Hull, Makita, and the Blackhawks, sweeping them in 4 straight, getting another chip off their shoulder. And for the first time in 22 years, they were off to the Stanley Cup Final. And the big bad Bruins stood in their way. It was a grueling series through and through. The Rangers, however, dropped the first 2 games in Boston, won the 3rd back home, but lost the 4th. They stayed off on elimination in an epic Game 5 win at the Garden, Boston Garden that is. Despite having Esposito's number in this series, however, it wasn't enough. The Bruins won it in 6. This intense rivalry culminated in a Bruins Stanley Cup win. A heartbreaking end to a dream season. In that year's draft, however, the cracks started to show, well, a little bit. Now, Francis did draft center Bob McMillan. That was a good move. And they also took defenseman Larry Sakarouk in the 2nd round over Tom Blanton. That was not a good move. This, however, will go even more wrong future-wise. Also, a new team entered the fray in the NHL when the league expanded to 16 teams. The Atlanta Flames and the New York Islanders had arrived. Well, needless to say, Rangers fans felt the same way Yankees fans did when the Mets arrived, or how Giants fans felt when the Jets joined the NFL. They resented the fact that any other team would dare infringe on New York territory in any way, shape, or form, so an instant rivalry was formed. It seemed some of the moves the Rangers and Francis were making didn't really affect them badly at this time, although some might come back to haunt them, as we'll get to. Also, I should bring up, however, there is one. In 1969, they drafted a youngster by the name of Andre Dupont, 8th overall. Built like a moose, shall we say. Well, they gave up on him. He spent a couple seasons in Omaha, played 7 games for the Rangers during the 71-72 season. They traded him to the Blues and got 3 guys who played a combined 110 games for them. Now, granted, the Blues blew it with Dupont as well, but the Moose went on to play over 800 games in the NHL and became a very popular fan favorite in Philadelphia for the Flyers, winning 2 Stanley Cup rings and playing in 4 finals overall. He became a very reliable defenseman, and he was a career plus 302. But the Rangers surged on in the 1972-73 season. They had a 102-point season. The Big Guns were firing on all cylinders, but they encountered the big bad Bruins again in the playoffs and beat them in 5 games. As this rivalry continues to intensify, this was a huge, satisfying moment for the Rangers and their fans, and regarded as one of the most memorable in team history. But the Hawks came back to haunt them, and they lost in 5 games, were stopped from a second straight Cup berth. The 1973 draft saw one of the best draft classes of the era in the first round, and even though the Rangers had the 14th overall pick, they made quite the dandy. They chose winger Rick Middleton from the Oshawa Generals, the OHL's most outstanding player in 1973. Superb stick handler with speed, creativity, fearless play, and I don't know, kind of think of Pavel Datsyuk back in the 70s if that's the case. Middleton was a magic man in his own right. With defensive capabilities, can kill a penalty, produce on a power play. In 2 seasons with the Generals, he notched 103 goals, 104 assists for 207 points in just 115 games. Coming off the epic 72-73 season with 67 goals, 70 assists, 137 points in 62 games. Oh yeah, they have to hang on to him for a long time. Anyway. They also chose Pat Hickey later in the draft, 30th overall, a left winger who provides two-way depth, and he's picked with the Hamilton Red Wings. In 3 seasons, he garnered 68 goals, 103 assists for 171 points in 164 games. 32 goals, 47 assists for 79 points were his totals in 1972-73. However, he's choosing to report to the WHA Toronto Toros, who also drafted him, but we'll be seeing him. Despite a rough start in October for the 73-74 season, the Rangers got it together by the end of November, but they made a trade. On November 30th, 1973, Francis sent forwards Mike Murphy, Tom C. Williams, and defenseman Sheldon Kanegeiser to the LA Kings for Réal Lemieux, who wouldn't last, and defenseman Jean Marot. Marot was in his 9th NHL season at the time of this trade, and he had played in 581 games. He spent time with Boston, Chicago, but is more remembered for his time with the Kings. Not very tall, but built like a rhino. He had a great physical presence. He did have 238 points, but was an abysmal minus 131. Although that's par for the course of the Kings in that era. He could be much more substantial, however, on a team like this. But considering Murphy ended up playing 620 games for the Kings and became their captain, and even Williams would go on to have a couple of really good seasons among 375 games, I wouldn't call this a great move. But Francis hadn't completely lost his magic yet. He did play the Kings like fiddles later that year, giving them Gene Carr, who did play 212 games for LA. But in exchange, they got a 1977 first-round draft pick. That would be Ron Duguay. The Rangers, again in 73-74, had a lot going for them. Brad Park had another epic season, but couldn't wrestle away that Norris Trophy from Bobby Orr. But then again, who could? But he even finished in the top 10 in scoring that year. Gilbert had a great year. Stemkowski had a banner year. Vickers reached 34 goals. Rattel missed 12 games, but still had a good season. Hatfield had 27 goals, and Kachuk had 21. Sealing and Nielsen were also playing great defensive hockey, but it's a bit of a rough year for Eddie and Villemere. But still, they played in some big games. The Rangers slipped a bit, and they were still a 94-point team, and they beat the defending champion Habs in 6 games in the playoffs, but lost to eventual champions the Flyers in 6, who had Andre Dupont. This is where many feel Emile Francis truly started to lose it. At the 1974 draft, Francis, however, did make a great steal. 30th overall, he took defenseman Ron Greschner from the new Westminster Bruins in the West Coast Hockey League. Tremendous skater with a physical presence as well, 6'2" and over 200 pounds. He's coming off an incredible season, showing a huge offensive spark, which is very much fit for the era ahead of him. 33 goals, 70 assists for 103 points in 67 games, and 170 penalty minutes. A man tailor-made for the Rangers. Also around the time of this draft, it was becoming known that Francis was shopping Vic Hadfield around. And Vicious Vic was actually coming off a good season. 27 goals, 28 assists for 55 points. But he wasn't producing at the levels he previously did. But was still a key for this team. Now, it's understood changes have to be made sometime. And yeah, Hadfield is getting older. And they have Steve Vickers, who they feel will be his successor in that regard. But I'm sure they can get a fair bit for him. So on May 27, 1974, Francis sent Hadfield to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for defenseman Nick Beverly. Okay, that's it, I guess. Well, anyway, Beverly has size. He has played a total of 149 games since 1967, joining the Bruins full-time in 72-73. His career has 27 points. Well, he has a -9. Being on the Pens, I'll do that to you. But then, being shipped to the Pens the following season, in the 73-74, he played 68 games and was a -16. Beverly, however, could thrive in the Rangers system. I truly believe, however, Francis got the short end of the stick on this one, as Hadfield had 2 more 30-goal seasons. Trading him may have been a move that needed to be made. Yes, that can easily be disputed one way or the other. But he could have gotten a lot more, and perhaps even better. And another trade was made on August 29, 1974. They sent Larry Sakharuk and a 1976 or 77 first-round pick. It would end up being the latter in exchange for winger Greg Hollis to the St. Louis Blues. Honestly, this isn't a terrible deal, at least on paper. Hollis is a solid, hard-working forward that can really produce since he's entered the NHL. And in 4 seasons, he has scored 96 goals, added 82 assists for 178 points in 293 games. And he's coming off a season where he scored 22 goals, 25 assists for 47 points in 78 games split between the Penguins and Blues. During his first 3 seasons in the NHL, which were all with Pittsburgh, he made the NHL All-Star Game every year and was All-Star Game MVP in 1973. He was a bad career -71, but the Penguins. Francis feels it's time for a youth movement in New York, and he let 2 strong defensemen go without any fuss at all. And I'm going to preface this by saying again, yes, I understand the motive of trying to build something different when things just aren't working out the way you want them to, but he literally got nothing back for these guys. He placed them on waivers. Even a low draft pick could have sufficed. Jim Nielsen was let go and picked up by the Seals. So yeah, needless to say, once they became the Barons, his career didn't get any better. He still played 230 more games in the NHL, played 35 more in the WHA for the Oilers. Meaning Francis probably could have still gotten something for him. And early in the 1974-75 season, Rod Sealing was placed on waivers. Yes, he was getting older. Yes, the logic of parting with him is valid. But he got nothing back. And he did spend 1 game with the Caps, but still proved useful to the Leafs for a couple seasons, and the Blues for a couple, for finishing his career with the Flames. 334 games he still played, and again, nothing in exchange for this guy. And that's because they were going to hedge their bets on a new defenseman. Undrafted John Bednarski, who could be a nasty piece of work sometimes. He spent time in the AHL over the last few seasons, and scored 110 points in 173 games, accumulated 264 penalty minutes. Also, the Rangers claimed goalie Dunk Wilson off waivers. He was the starter for the Vancouver Canucks for a couple seasons, but the Canucks were awful. And even when he went to a better team in Toronto, he still didn't seem to thrive much. He has an overall record of 50, 99, and 17. Yikes. Goals against average of 3.69. Yee. And a save percentage of 885. Ew. And 3 shutouts. The Rangers finished the 1974-75 season 37-29-14 for 88 points. Needless to say, Francis was not pleased with this, even though not a bad season at all. Though Gilbert and Rattel still had 90-plus points. Brad Park missed 15 games but was still productive when healthy, and actually, Nick Beverly fit in pretty well. Jacquemin and Villemere had a rough year, but Steve Vickers was a second-team All-Star. But then Francis was furious when the Rangers, under the new playoff format, were eliminated in the preliminary round in a best-of-3 series in a bad overtime loss to the Islanders. That drew the ire of many fans to boot, who actually turned against Vickers for a bad play he made that allowed the series-winning overtime goal. Frustrated with the team's overall direction and feeling they're not motivated whatsoever, Francis now has daunting tasks ahead of him as we get ready for our story of the 1975-76 season. And to begin this journey this season, we start with the 1975 NHL Amateur Draft, and I have to be completely fair, this was a very weak draft class compared to other years of the decade. A lot of good players came out of it, a lot of really good players as a matter of fact. But, not too many great ones. The Rangers, with the 12th overall pick in the first round, chose center Wayne Dillon. Now this draft class overall for the Rangers will play 323 total games for them. Not great. Other teams had much worse luck in this draft, and I really can't fault Emile Francis for this one. And indeed, Dillon was a good pick on paper. Product of the Toronto Marlies and Juniors, he actually spent the last 2 seasons playing professionally in the WHA for the Toronto Toros. In 2 seasons, he has scored 59 goals, 101 assists for 160 points in 148 games. He's going to have a superb season of 29 goals, 66 assists for 95 points in 77 games. Very good playmaker with size, quickness, and indeed will opt to sign with the Rangers this season rather than stay in the WHA. The second round pick was a new goaltender, Doug Sodar from the Edmonton Oil Kings of the West Coast Hockey League. Some of his stats are hard to find, but he is coming off a season where he finished 31, 27, and 5. With a shutout, his 4.42 goals against average and .880 save percentage don't look that promising, but, well, high-scoring junior hockey, folks. And Francis made a trade on June 18, 1975 to, the Blues. They sent to St. Louis right winger Jerry Butler, lower line winger Burt Wilson, and longtime Gritty fan favorite Ted Irvine in exchange for center Bill Collins and 22-year-old goalie John Davidson. First with Collins, and yes, your ears don't deceive you, you did hear that name earlier in the video. The Leafs had his rights in 1964, and the Rangers obtained them in the Andy Bathgate trade. But he never played a single NHL game until 1967 when he was chosen by expansion Minnesota North Stars. In 8 seasons, Collins has amassed 131 goals, 126 assists for 257 points in 581 games between the Stars, the Habs, the Red Wings, and of course the Blues. He was a career minus 62. Be that as it may, he's a good enough utility player and is actually coming off a really good season with the Blues with 22 goals, 15 assists for 37 points and a +4 in 70 games. And now we go to the man who would become affectionately known as JD, John Davidson. Born in Ottawa but grew up out west, he was a major junior hockey star for the Calgary Centennials and was taken 5th overall by the Blues in 1973. In 2 seasons, he gone 30, 34, and 14 with a 3.38 goals against average, a so-so 94 save percentage, and is coming off a year where he finished 17, 15, and 7 as he shared net mining duties with veteran goaltender Eddie Johnston. And he had a 3.66 goals against average and 887 save percentage. Either way, another young goalie isn't the worst thing for the Rangers right now. This was a solid trade. In another deal with the Blues, nearing the start of the season, on September 20th, 1975, the Rangers obtained defenseman Larry Sakarik for future considerations. And again, that name does indeed sound familiar, right? As I mentioned him earlier. He was really drafted by the Rangers in 1972, but after just playing 31 games over 2 seasons and spending time in the minors, he was part of the Greg Paulus trade to the Blues. But then something happened. He had a breakout season in St. Louis in 1974-75, where he notched 20 goals, 22 assists for 42 points in 76 games, and Francis is like, well, gee, I want to give this guy another chance. And by only giving up future considerations, you might be thinking Emile Francis pulled a gotcha on the Blues. Well, it ended up being cash. Okay, good. And the Blues also got the rights to Bob McMillan. Not smart. Okay, it's true. Bob did play 22 games for the Rangers this past season. He didn't look too good, but wasn't really being fully utilized or developed for that matter. He go on to play 731 career games after leaving the Rangers, most of them with the Flames, as the Blues would blow it with him too. I'll get to that later. But in the 731 games he did play, he scored 574 points. In the 1978-79 season, he scored a league 5th best 108 points and won the Lady Byng Trophy for excellence in sportsmanship. Also, Emile Francis is stepping back from coaching this year. He's going to focus on his general manager role only. And the Rangers hire former player Ron Stewart. Stewart was a solid, hard-working grinder in his playing career. He played 1,353 NHL games over 21 seasons, primarily with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But he also had stints with Boston, St. Louis, but he arrived with the Rangers in 1967. And outside of a 42-game stint with the Canucks and ending his career with the Islanders for 22 games, he spent 6 seasons there. He spent the 1973-74 season coaching the Portland Buckaroos of the WHL Senior League and led them to a championship appearance. And then led the Springfield Indians of the AHL in 1974-75 to the Calder Cup. And they won it all. So impressed with his work, he was easy to hire with his success. Well, we're now set for the season. Well, here we are. The Rangers' 50th anniversary season about to commence. A celebration it should be of iconic players and the glory they have achieved. On paper, the Rangers aren't exactly considered a contender anymore, but they're not exactly deemed as failures yet at this point. It's hard to predict just where this team is going to go, but we're about to find out soon as we get ready for opening night. And indeed, the Rangers will begin the season at home at Madison Square Garden against an Original Six rival, the Chicago Blackhawks, on October 8th, 1975. Hawks have been prominent contenders for the most part of a decade, but still haven't won the Cup since 1961. They're coming off a so-so season where they did make the playoffs and got past the preliminary round, but were then bounced out by Buffalo in 5 games. They still had a strong lineup on paper. The iconic Stan Mikita going into his 17th season can still produce, the pocket jet Dennis Hull, and other talents up front such as Ivan Bolderud, Dale Talon, and Cliff Corral. A defense led by tough Keith Magnuson as well as Dick Redmond. And in net, the great Tony Esposito. And in the lineup for your New York Rangers, starting with the forwards, making their Ranger debuts, Bill Collins, Wayne Dillon, and Pat Hickey. Coming out 20-goal seasons, Bill Fairbairn, Greg Paulus, Derek Sanderson, and sophomore Rick Middleton. And during his 8th season with the Rangers, Walt Kachuk. And during his 4th season, coming off a career-high 41 goals, All-Star Steve Vickers. Coming off a 97-point season, leading in team scoring and entering his 14th, Rod Gilbert. And entering his 15th season, coming off a 90-plus point season, gentleman Jean Rattel. Now on the defense, John Bednarski. Entering his 2nd season as a Ranger, Nick Beverly. Sophomore sensation, Ron Greshner. Returning to the Rangers this season, Larry Sakharuk. Entering his 3rd season as a Ranger, Gilles Marot. And entering his 8th season, all with the Rangers, superstar Brad Park. And last, and most certainly not least, getting the start in goal, entering his 11th season, number 1 in your programs, number 1 in your hearts, Eddie Giacoman. Eddie. And they're led by rookie head coach Ron Stewart. And we're just about ready to drop the puck. Rangers fans are psyched as the Garden is going crazy, wanting to take it to those bastard Blackhawks. And there's a few heated moments, but the game so far is staying steady, and both teams are playing very disciplined in the first period. Giacomo makes the saves when he needs to, but the defense is doing their job in this one. The Rangers are putting pressure on Tonio, but nothing is coming of it. And we end the first period with no score. But early in the second, the Rangers go on a power play after Talon gets called for a cross-check. Now, the Rangers are 0 for 1 so far in this game, but their power play was one of the most dangerous in the entire league last season. And now, Hickey gets it to Kachuk, who sees Fairbairn near the net. He scores, and the Rangers lead 1-0, and MSG is in a frenzy. It's looking good early on. The Rangers cling on to that lead as the period begins to wind down, but Greshner is called for tripping. And so is Park soon after, as the MSG crowd lets the refs know how they feel, as only New Yorkers can. The Hawks also have an excellent power play, but the Rangers' penalty kill is really good as well. But the 2-minute advantage is too much to handle, and the Hawks tie the game, and that's how it ends after 40 minutes, deadlocked at 1. Well, the Hawks score again, 5:30 into the third to take a 2-1 lead. However, on another power play, in the third period, 9:01 in, Rod Gilbert sees an opening and sees Rick Middleton, who snaps it past Tonio, and the Rangers have tied the game 2-2. Both teams press, especially the Rangers looking for that go-ahead marker, but Tonio bars the door. And remember, there is no regular season overtime in this era, and the game is over. It ends in a 2-2 tie. Middleton is named first star of the game for his clutch heroics, while Fairbairn is named the third, while Hawks goalie Tony Esposito is the second. Either way, not a terrible start for the Rangers. They did look solid in many aspects in this one. They then notched their first win of the season 2 days later when they made that trip to the hockey hotbed that is Atlanta and took on the Flames. And John Davidson's first start in net as a member of the Rangers was a big success. He was on a great show, stopping 25 shots. And the Rangers' big guns deliver in a tight 2-1 win. Gilbert and Rattel each have a goal and a helper for 2 points, while Vickers has 2 assists. 2 days later, they were back home hosting big acquisition Marcel Dion and the LA Kings, who were coming off one of their best seasons ever. But it was a brutal outing for the Rangers, losing 6-4. Jacobin was brutal here, 6 goals on 25 shots. Ugh. Gilbert played great, and Vickers gets his first goal of the season. They got another win over the Flames, this time at home, 3-1. Rattel and Gilbert each have a goal and a helper, and Nick Beverly plays very well out of boot. And Davidson gets another win, but then they encountered a decent-looking Toronto Maple Leafs squad led by Darryl Sittler, Lanny McDonald, and Boreas Salming. And the Rangers lose 4-1. Jacobin again has a rough night, Middleton getting the lone goal. But then they return home to face the Vancouver Canucks, who are coming off their best season yet from their short franchise history. And things look promising as hell as the Rangers obliterate them 8-1. A huge team effort overall, though. 8 different players scored each of the goals. Rattel played a beauty here. A goal, 3 assists for 4 points. Gilbert has a goal and 2 assists for 3 points, as does Park, who, to be honest, hasn't been off to the best start this season. And first-round pick Wayne Dillon, who has not played well really at all until this game, not just 3 assists. Great games from Vickers, Hickey, Greshner, Bednarski, Marot, and Davidson remains undefeated in net. Things are looking good. Then they go to shit. And by that I mean the drizzling shits. Diarrhea personified. It's an utter embarrassment. The Rangers are decimated 9-1 by the French connection of Perrault, Martin, and Robert, and the undefeated Buffalo Sabres, who were also Stanley Cup finalists last season. Greshner is awful, but he actually has the lone goal, oddly enough. As is Fairbairn, he's pretty bad. Hickey, Bednarski, and Hollis are brutal. Davidson allows all 9 goals in his first loss as a Ranger. And it doesn't get much better. They're embarrassed 7-1 by sensational defenseman Denny Pavla and rookie Brian Trotche and the Islanders. Awful game from Derek Sanderson. Davidson again lets in all 7 goals. Oh, Rattel with the lone goal. And back home, hey, they scored 2 goals, but the Flyers score 7. Indeed, the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions, led by Bobby Clark, Bill Barber, Reggie Leach, and hey, there's Andre Dupont, destroy the Blue Shirts. Jacobin is lit up worse than Rockefeller Center. Vickers with 2 goals, Rattel with 2 assists, however. This was, I think, the moment when people came to see the facts that sadly this team is going to suck. Horrible performances from a lot of players. Rattel was actually one of the better ones out there. He didn't completely suck whatsoever. Gilbert, well, he was kind of absent, but I wouldn't say he was bad. Vickers wasn't too bad in this stretch. He, like Rattel, had 3 points and was a -2. Derek Sanderson, truly abysmal. No points. -7. He's traded where? The Blues. Defenseman Ron Greshner had a goal and assist, but was a -8. Oh. Brad Park was pointless and a terrible -6. What is going on with him so far this season? Oh, and those poor goalies. JD, John Davidson, was off to a great start this season, but has now allowed 16 goals in 2 games, save percentage of .750. And Eddie Jacobin allowed, of course, 7 goals in this one game in this stretch, and .720 save percentage. Oh my goodness. Needless to say, Emile Francis is angrier than a hippo with a hernia, and at this rate probably looks like one. The New York sports media are roasting the Rangers this stretch of games. Francis is so angry, he placed the entire team on waivers. Well, okay, I'm kind of joking. He may have said he did, or at least alluded to it, but it was just seen as a motivational tactic. He would later say it was more like 5 or 6. It seems waivers is the solution to all his problems these days. We'll soon find out. But he actually chose to make an actual trade on October 28, 1975, parting with goaltender Gilles Villemere, who, yes, was on the roster, but hadn't played a single game this season yet due to injuries, and had been under the Rangers umbrella for over a decade. But he's going to Chicago in exchange for veteran defenseman Doug Jarrett. Jarrett was a reliable hand that had good size on him, playing a traditional style and not afraid to use physicality. He hadn't played a game yet himself this season due to injury, but spent all 11 previous seasons of his career in Chicago. He played 721 games, was an excellent plus 168, and added 216 points. He also played in his first NHL All-Star game last season, and in his final season with the Hawks, he played in all but one game, was a plus 13, adding 26 points. Not a bad grab for the Rangers on paper, as he also provides good leadership qualities. But the very next day would be one of the angriest days for Rangers fans in team history even to this day. Eddie Giacomin really was placed on waivers and was picked up by the Detroit Red Wings. Not since the Bathgate trade has one drew such venomous hatred from Rangers fans. Eddie wasn't just a great goalie, he was beloved by everyone in Blue Shirt Nation. But the fact is, he was playing horribly. He had been on a downward trend actually the last couple of seasons. I get it though. You love a player, you don't want to see him go. Been there, done that as a fan of professional sports. But here's what's even worse in the whole scenario. Look back in hindsight. Francis could have got something in return for him. Giacomin may have been nearing the end, yes. But he still got something for Villemure, who's around the same age as Giacomin. You mean to tell me he couldn't be able to get something for Eddie? Horrible move by Emile Francis. But that's the main reason why. Rangers fans are now calling for his head, urging him to be fired. Feeling he has completely lost touch, and I'm sorry to say it's hard to argue at this point. So now, goalie Dunk Wilson will be activated as the Rangers' new backup, as Davidson is officially the number one guy. Well, at least however to end the month, the Rangers break that terrible 3-game losing streak in front of their frustrated fans at home as Doug Jarrett makes his debut for the club. They're able to beat Gary Unger and the St. Louis Blues as Davidson gets one over his former team, 3-1. 8 Rangers players had a point and finally look cohesive for the first time in a little while. Well, not a great start, and that horrendous 3-game skid was definitely a cage rattler. Also, the departure of Giacomin has left a sour taste in the mouth of Rangers fans and just killed overall morale. And they start 4-5-1 in the first 10 games of the season in October, but I wouldn't say it's really time to panic at this point. It should be noted that the playoff seeding is the top 3 teams in each division make the playoffs, the 4 division winners getting a bye from the preliminary round. And they only sit at 9 points, but are ahead of the Flames due to winning both games against them so far. The Flames have the exact same record. And if Rangers fans thought that Eddie's departure was going to shake things up in that organization, you ain't seen nothing yet. Well, to no surprise, despite the bad start, the big guns on front are the ones delivering the most, as veterans Jean Rattel and Rod Gilbert lead the team in scoring each with 13 points. Rattel leads the team in goals with 5, adding 8 assists, while Gilbert had 4 goals, adding 9 helpers. Steve Vickers was third in team scoring for the month with 4 goals and 7 assists for 11 points. But a lot of the forward core is struggling low down the lines. Fairbairn isn't playing well. Dylan is off to a bad start in his NHL career. Derek Sanderson played so bad he was turfed. Greg Polisauer is decent. Walkachuk still in some substance. And Pat Hickey was awful. Middleton was hit or miss. Domkowski had injuries, but hasn't really been much of a highlight at all in the games he has played. And neither has Collins. Well, in addition to being the top 3 scorers on the team, Rattel, Gilbert, and Vickers, who often, of course, work together as a line, were all tied in that team for a +4 in October. Showing that even during the losing streak, they still held it together for the most part and not making too many mistakes out there. Brad Park led all defensemen in scoring with 5 points, 2 goals, 3 assists. And that's not really surprising, but overall it wasn't really a good month for him outside of a couple games, mainly the dominant win over the Canucks. The defense overall was, again, not very good for the Rangers this month, although credit does have to be given to Nick Beverly. At least he gave it a wholehearted effort, and has been pretty solid, I'd say. However, Bednarski has had injury issues. Greshner was horrendous during the losing streak. Sakharov, in the action he saw, wasn't all that impressive either. Moreau was on and off. And the goalies. John Davidson got off to a great start, but had those 2 performances during the losing streak to actually drag down his goals against average, which was decent, to a 3.33, which still isn't terrible. And his save percentage is a 8.72. However, the point is he did win all 4 games to the Rangers that month, and lost just 2 with those bad performances. But poor Eddie Giacomin. In his 11th season with the Rangers and in his final games, they were a disaster. Despite looking good in the season opener in the tie with Chicago, he ends his memorable run with the Rangers with a whimper. 0-3-1, a horrible 4.75 goals against average, and an even worse 806 save percentage. November did not start well at all for the Rangers, as they were shut out by the powerful Montreal Canadiens, firing 38 shots on Bunny Larocque. But the next game would be one of the most memorable in team history. On November 2nd, 1975, New York Rangers were hosting the Detroit Dead Things, Red Wings, who were actually worse than they were. A lot worse, if I'm being honest. Despite bolstering such talent as Mikey Redmond and Danny Grant, this team is a hopeless and hapless bunch. But of course, they have a new goaltender. Happens to be making his first start for them tonight. And of course, it's Eddie Giacomin. Well, I said how much Eddie was loved by Rangers fans. I don't think my words could ever really truly do it justice. If anything, you had to at least see what took place that night. The moment he skated on ice for the warm-ups, the familiar chant started, Eddie, Eddie, Eddie. And Rangers fans stood out of their seats as he skated towards the net to take his spot in the visitors' end of the arena for the very first time. Rangers fans chanted his name as the game was getting underway once again. Anytime the Rangers launched a shot at Eddie, the fans would boo. Well, didn't matter much. The Rangers were playing like crap. They were down 4-0 after 1, 6-2 after 2, and lost 6-4. Stopping 42 of 46 shots, Eddie was named the first star of the game and given a standing ovation once again he fought back the tears of this truly amazing moment. As to the Rangers, they continue to just look downright bad. It's named one of the greatest moments in Rangers and MSG history. While Eddie's return to MSG was expected to be a huge emotional night, nobody truly knew what the significance of the next game would hold. It was just about to be the start of a road trip for the Rangers against the Vancouver Canucks. And the Canucks, despite coming off their best season in their short history, led by Dennis Weberger, Harold Snepsts, and goaltender Gary Smith, they were off to a terrible start. Both teams were desperate for a win. Dunk Wilson is getting his first start of the season, that is, against his former team. The Rangers are pressing early, and the Canucks turn over the puck, and it lands on the stick of Pete Stemkowski, who parks it past Smith. Getting his first goal of the season, 3:40 into this one, and the Rangers draw first blood. However, just a mere 15 seconds later, the Canucks tie, and it stays 1-1 after the first period. The second period got underway, and as it rolled on, the game was still tied 1-1. That wasn't until nearly 6 minutes left in the frame. Greshner gets the puck out to Rattel, who sees his man. It's Vickers! He scores and gives the Rangers the go-ahead goal. 2-1 they lead. Then, 1:39 left in the period, Hickey gets the puck to Rattel, who sets up Fairbairn. And yes, the Rangers now have a 2-goal lead, 3-1, as Rattel notches his 481st career assist and 817th career point. And the Rangers carry that 3-1 lead into the second intermission. In the third period, the Rangers defense, including Brad Park, who's playing his 465th career game, are on point tonight. And then, just past the halfway point, Fairbairn gets it to Kachuk, who sets up Pat Hickey. And indeed, the Rangers take a monster 4-1 lead. The Canucks get one back, but the Rangers win it 4-2 and sweep the Three Stars. Fairbairn was first, Hickey was second, each of them with a goal and a helper, and Rattel was the third star with his 2 assists. Nobody knew, at least not the fans anyway, and even the media, but it would be his last game as a New York Ranger. Same with Brad Park, who played very well and was a +2. And they were thinking they were going to be suiting up for the Rangers to take on the Seals, but what came on the morning of November 7th as they were staying in their hotel rooms stunned the hockey world. It was arguably at that point the biggest trade in NHL history. General Manager Emile Francis sent icons Jean Rattel, Brad Park, along with minor league defenseman Joe Zanuzzi, to hated rivals, the Boston Bruins. In exchange from General Manager Harry Sinden, the Rangers received reliable and top defenseman Carl Vadnais and megastar forward Phil Esposito. The magnitude of this was huge at the time. While blockbuster trades have definitely happened before this seemed to take it to a whole new level and set a whole new precedent. Rangers fans at first were devastated. Boston fans weren't exactly thrilled about it either. Rangers fans were almost positive that Rattel and Park were blue shirt lifers. Pretty much anybody thought that. And while Esposito did start his career with Chicago, his stardom and immense success came in Boston. And his legacy is forever etched in the Garden. Everyone and their dog thought he'd finish his career as a Bruin. But let's take a look first at Carl Vadnais. Vadnais was an aggressive, hard-working defenseman who could lay out a good hit, but mainly protect his goaltenders, block shots, could lead a power play up front, and was a good setup man. He got his start in Montreal, but wasn't exactly utilized that much, but he finally got to show off what he can do as a popular member of the lowly California Seals. But despite his skills, he was drowning on a bad team, but finally got a rescue when he was traded to Boston during the 1971-72 season, helping them in a Stanley Cup win. He has played in 4 NHL All-Star games in 69, 70, and 72 with the Seals just before he was traded. And in his last season, full season with the Bruins in 75, he was also named to the All-Star game. While Brad Park was a one-of-a-kind defenseman, Vadnais is still a good grab for the Rangers. So far this season, he has 7 points in 12 games for the Bruins and is a +1. In his career, he has 332 points in 551 games, and he is a -4, but considering that all the time he spent with the crappy Seals, that's really not that bad. And now, the man they call Espo, Phil Esposito. The most dominant forward of his time. He wasn't always fancy, but nobody wanted him to be. They wanted him to score and score often. Boy, did he ever. He doesn't get enough recognition as perhaps the best low-slot position scorer of all time. In front of the net, he could very rarely be stopped by defenders or goalies. He had an excellent shot as well, and was a great playmaker setting up his wingers. And he was a tremendous leader who truly hated losing. In 12 NHL seasons, 533 goals, 653 assists for 1,186 points. He was among the NHL's all-time leading scorers. He was also a career plus 368. He has played in 860 games, 2 Stanley Cup rings in 70 and 72 with the Bruins, winner of the Hart Trophy as league MVP in 69 and 74, 5-time scoring champion, recipient of the Art Ross Trophy in 1969, and 4 years straight from 71 to 74. 6-time first-team All-Star, 6 straight years as a matter of fact, from 69 to 74, second-team All-Star in 68 and 75. He won the Pearson Trophy in 71 and 74 as Player's Choice MVP. Led the league in goals 6 straight seasons from 1970 to last season. Led the league in even strength goals twice. Led the league in power play goals 4 times. Led the league in shorthanded goals once. And led in plus-minus once. He has led the league in game-winning goals for 3 straight seasons. Led the league in total goals on ice for twice. Led the league in power play goals on ice for 6 straight times from 69 to 74. Led the league in offensive point shares 5 times, including 4 straight from 71 to 74. And at this point, still holds the NHL record for goals in a season with 76. Since then, nobody has even come close. Nobody's even reached 65. And points in a season with 152. And both of those records were set in the 1970-71 season. Hopefully some punk kid from Brantford doesn't come around and break them. But the rivalry between the Rangers and Bruins, added with the fact that the Rangers were not in very good shape, when Esposito was informed of the trade early in the morning at a Vancouver hotel led by head coach Don Cherry and despondent teammate superstar Bobby Orr that he'd been traded, before he found out the team, he said, "Grapes, if I've been traded to the Rangers, I'm going to jump out that window." To which Cherry replied, "Oh, Bobby, you better get away from that window." The rumor at the time was that Espo's ice time was being cut and didn't feel that should be the case, some citing his age, but here's a guy who still scored 60 goals in the previous season. I don't quite get it myself. Either way, so far this season, Espo has 14 points in 12 games. He's a -1, which not all that bad, but it's a little surprising still. Not long after the trade, the Rangers were set to take on the lowly Seals in Oakland, California, who didn't have much going for them despite having talent such as Al McAdam, Dennis Marek, Jim Pappen, and Gilles Meloche in net. And just a mere half day after wanting to jump out the window at the thought of even playing for this club, he will be wearing their uniform on this night. Phil Esposito makes his debut as a Ranger. It was a surreal sight when he skated out on ice for the pregame warm-ups. It does not start out well as the Seals strike just a minute into the game. The Rangers are trying desperately to get into it. Espo's working his butt off out there, still showing that work ethic despite the range of emotions he must have been going through to focus on this game. And at the 6-minute mark, Murat clears the puck to Fairbairn, who goes down Meloche and scores. The Rangers tie it up. But the Seals retook the lead 2:20 later. But then 1:23 left in the period. It happened. Gilbert takes the puck and begins the rush. He sees Vickers on his opposite wing, and they put it on net perfectly for Phil Esposito. His 7th goal of the season, 534th of his career, and first as a New York Ranger. And it ties the game. And Espo seems happy to score on with his new team, and the game is deadlocked 2-2 going into first intermission. The Seals, however, took the lead 6:37 into the second period, but 3:20 later, Stemkowski gets the puck to Paulus, who sees Middleton, scores a beauty, and once again the Rangers tie it. But then the Seals retake the lead 1:05 later, with 2:34 after that on a power play. A back clearing attempt was on the stick of Rod Gilbert, and he sees Espo at center, and Philly Boy has his 2nd goal of the game. What a debut for his Rangers, as he seems to be focused on his new team very quickly. And they once again have tied it, but now they're down 5-4 after 2. They'd be down 7-4 in the third to the Seals in 1975. Not that it really makes it different from any other year. But in final minute, the game out of reach, however, the Rangers won't go out so quietly, as Greshner sends Espo in on goal with Gilbert, who scores. The Rangers cut the gap to 7-5 with 35 seconds left, as Espo's debut of the Rangers is a success with his 3rd point of the game. They still have a loss, of course, 7-5. But hey, Phil Esposito, despite the discouragement and emotion of being traded by the team he oh so adored, and now having to lead the city and fans that he also adored, still kept his focus on the game, not even a full day after it happened. And now he'll work his tail off for his new club. His 2 goals and an apple, 3 points was enough to get him named 2nd star of the game. However, the next game in LA against the Kings, Espo was shut down completely. The Rangers lose 3-1, Hickey with a lone goal. Wilson actually played okay in net, stopping 27 of 30 shots. Espo misses the next game due to injury, which is a 5-3 loss to the Blues. Wayne Dillon, however, plays a beauty with 2 goals and an assist for 3 points, while Gilbert also plays great with a goal, 2 assists for 3 points. And Vickers has 3 assists. Davidson was let there to dry in a lot of situations in this one. The Rangers return home, and Espo's still out of action, and will not make his home debut, but Carl Vadnais at last makes his debut as the Ranger. And he plays pretty well, as the Rangers do have to settle for a tie, another tie that is, with the sharp-looking Blackhawks 4-4. Middleton playing a beaut with 2 goals, while Paulus and Dillon had 2 helpers each. Then the Rangers go into the Twin Cities and take care of the sucky North Stars, 5-2, snapping that 4-game winless skid. A monster game for Vickers, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points. And Dillon has come on lately, a 3-point night, goal and 2 assists. Gilbert played well once again. Vadnais was excellent on defense. And then the Rangers host the Red Wings again. Eddie Giacomin gets another amazing reception. And Phil Esposito finally makes his home debut. And those very fans who booed him out of the building for a better part of a decade actually give him a really good reception. He was welcome to New York, despite what they had to give up to get him, as it's clear they know he is a born winner with a lot of success. But Francis has yet to be forgiven on the other hand. Espo is pointless, but the Rangers win 3-0 on the strength of John Davidson's first career shutout and goals by Stemkowski, Kachuk, and Vickers. Yep, the Rangers are unbeaten in 3. Can they carry that momentum against the Kansas City and the sucky Scouts? They absolutely don't. They lose 6-4 to the Scouts in 19... Oh, hell, who am I kidding? Any of the 2 years they existed, you shouldn't be losing to them. Well, Bednarski and Greshner were like pylons out there. Middleton had a great game, however, once again with a goal, 2 helpers for 3 points. Stemkowski also played well with 2 goals. Vadnais had a goal and a helper. Wilson wasn't all that stellar in net. Well, hey, it's just a setback. They can overcome this. And that's what I would be saying if they weren't playing the Flyers next and lose 4-2. Hey, Gilbert and Kachuk with the goals. And Esposito is starting to face criticism as he hasn't produced much outside of his first game with the Rangers. Davidson in this one faced 42 shots. But they get the better of the Seals in a tight 3-2 win. Dillon, who cooled off a bit, reignited himself. Another 3-point night, 2 goals and a helper. And Vickers had another 3-point night himself, assisting on all 3 goals. Davidson played well in net, stopping 27 of 29 shots. Espo still out of action. Then it would be another emotional game as this wild month continues. As on November 26, 1975, Rattel and Park, along with superstar Bobby Orr and the rest of the Boston Bruins, are coming to town. And the Rangers are still without Phil Esposito for this one. Rod Gilbert is now out of action, which is going to hurt. Rattel and Park get an amazing reception upon their return to MSG. Since playing for Boston, the Bruins have gone 5-1-3 in 9 games since Rattel and Park joined them and are looking fantastic. Rattel has only missed one of those games, but in the 8 he's played, he's averaged a point a game. The goal, 7 assists for 8 points, and was a +3 to boot. Brad Park had 2 goals, 6 assists for 8 points as well in 9 games. He was a -1, but still playing very well. And the Bruins win 6-4. Rattel has a goal and a helper. Park has an assist. The Rangers, since this trade, have now gone 3-6-1 after this loss. Esposito has scored 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points in the 5 games he has played so far, as he has missed 5, including this one, and he's a -6. However, Carl Vadnais, on the other hand, in 7 games, has a goal, 4 assists, 5 points, is a +2. Stimkowski was the standout in this game with a goal and a helper. Now, obviously, it's still way too early to say who won this blockbuster trade, but so far, obviously, people are saying unanimously it's the Bruins. And the Rangers lose their next game as well. Philly Boy returns, and he won't miss any more action this year. That's the good news. He did have a goal, but the Rangers were humiliated 8-3. Lost to Jean Pronovo, Pierre LaRouche, and a decent-looking Penguin scene. Oh, yeah, there's Vic Hadfield with a goal and a helper. For the Rangers, Marat had 2 assists. Wilson was awful in net. But the Rangers ended this tumultuous month strong. Espo lives again. 2 goals! While Sakharuk, Kachuk, and Middleton each have 2 assists as the Rangers down the Blues 5-2. And what had to be the most dramatic and insane month, arguably, in team history, the Rangers went 5-9-1 in November of 75. That's not good whatsoever. And now sit at 9-14-2, 20 points, and are in dead last in their division. The only saving grace is that the Flames are only just 2 points ahead of them in the third, as the Islanders are a good 7 points ahead in their second place spot, while the Flyers dominate the division. Steve Vickers leads the team in scoring this month with 6 goals, 11 assists for 17 points in 15 games. It was a bad -6. Tied for second at 13 points each was Rick Middleton, who's hustling game in and game out, with 8 goals, 5 assists for 13 points himself, and has a very bad -7, but still proves to be a player with heart out there. Wayne Dillon has come alive after a bad start to the season. 6 goals, 7 assists, 13 points, a passable -1. Proved to be the Rangers' best all-around forward this month. Went on a couple hot streaks after a bad start, as I said, and as a first-round draft pick, the pressure had to be lingering. Phil Esposito started red hot after his arrival in his first game, but cooled off dramatically and was hurt and very inconsistent, but seems to be finding his groove by the end of the month again. Rod Gilbert was playing very well, but now he's missing some action. Fairbairn and Hickey were decent, while Paulson and Stimkowski were solid in certain games, while call-up Jerry Holland actually did decently as well. Walt Kachuk continues to work hard for this club, and Bill Collins, in the action he saw this month, was not good. Carl Vadnais has really adjusted well since the trade arriving in New York and led the team with a +2. He has been by far their best blue liner this month, and he tied the team lead in points with 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points. He tied with Marat for defenseman in scoring, who had 6 points, all of which were assists. And Marat was actually solid this month too in many games. Ron Greshner shows he still has a lot of evolving to do. It was a team worst -13 and had some atrocious games, but the odd thing is, he actually played very well in a few. Beverly and Bednarski were not exactly standouts this month, but I wouldn't say they were exactly awful. Regardless, the Rangers' defense as a whole just feels very incomplete. And lastly, those poor goalies. John Davidson, now the #1 man in New York, faces so much pressure. Some games he was left out to dry, others he was just plain bad, and others he was actually really good still. Despite his hard work and hustle, he went 3-6-0 with a bad 4.03 goals against average and a not so good 874 save percentage. The bright spot is, however, he did obtain his first career shutout in his 3rd season. As for Dunk Wilson, Now the team's backup, he wasn't much better. Yeah, 2-3-1 record. That might not sound awful, merely mediocre, but his 420 goals against average was bad, and so was his awful .855 save percentage. Lord help this club. But wow! The Rangers finally get a hot streak, and they go unbeaten in their first 6 games of the month of December of 1975. It also brings their overall unbeaten streak to 7. Well, the month started with a 6-6 tie with Buffalo, last year's Stanley Cup runner-up. Hall's had his best game of the season so far, with a goal, 2 assists for 3 points, and Esposito with 2 goals, as Fairbairn, Middleton, and Stemkowski each had 2 points. Then it was back-to-back wins against the sophomore Succations. They first toppled the Kansas City Scouts 3-2. Espo stays hot with 2 assists, while Vickers has the same, and Middleton with a goal and a helper. And Davidson with an excellent night in net, stopping 27 shots. Then it was a 5-2 win over the crappy Caps. Espo has his 4th straight 2-point game with a goal and a helper. Wow. But it was Carl Vadnais who stole the show on this one. A goal, 3 assists for 4 points. An unlikely hero, Jerry Holland, 2 goals and an assist for 3 points. Davidson again solid in net. They then settled for another tie with Buffalo, this time 2-2. Kachuk set up Holland set up Kachuk, and that was the extent of the 2 points, of course. Davidson saw 38 shots and had an epic highlight reel outing. But then came the biggest win of the hot streak, maybe even their biggest win of the year, a 5-1 thrashing of the Bruins. While Espo did get a very warm reception from his old fans at the Boston Garden, he also had 2 assists, as did Fairbairn and Middleton. Vickers had 2 goals, but Wayne Dillon, who had been pretty dry so far this month, comes alive again with 2 goals and a helper for 3 points. This one truly delighted Rangers fans back home. And then they crushed the Red Wings, 5-2 in Motown. Espo with 3 assists, Vickers with another 2 goals, Marat plays very well, Davidson again awesome in net with 30 saves. Man, this is more like it. The Rangers are working together very cohesively, as during this 7-game unbeaten streak, and of course I'm counting the end of November win against the Blues, Phil Esposito was back to his old self fully. 5 goals, 8 assists, 13 points, and +2, almost 2 points a game. The only time he didn't score on this streak was actually the second tie with Buffalo. Rick Middleton was a beast here. 3 goals, 7 assists, 10 points, and even 0. Steve Vickers, 5 goals, 3 assists, 8 points, and a +1. And Bill Fairbairn really was the X-factor with his great 2-way play here on the hot streak among forwards. 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points, and a massive +5. And the defense was looking fantastic as well, as Vadnais proves to be a big acquisition. 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points, +5. Gilles Marat, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, and a +2. And Doug Jarrett, who had only played in 2 games in November since being acquired by the Rangers, also starts to shine, playing in 6 games to start the month, and was a +3 in this stretch. And JD, John Davidson, played every game on this hot streak, going 5-0-2, a very good 2.44 goals against average, an excellent .915 save percentage, just amazing numbers. What's even crazier about this hot streak is that they did it all without Rod Gilbert in the lineup. But they get some great news. He's returning as the Rangers get ready to host the Maple Leafs. And of course that means a 3-game losing streak. And it's pretty bad. The Leafs destroy the Rangers 6-1. A very bad game for Davidson, as well as Bednarski and Greshner, who are terrible on defense. Espo is pretty bad to boot up front, has his worst game yet. Minor league call-up Ed Johnstone gets the lone goal. And they were shut out by the Islanders, firing in 26 shots on goalie Billy Smith. Tough losses, Espo, Vickers, and Middleton were on ice for all 3 goals. Ouch. And then it gets worse, as they are indeed scorched by the Flames, 8-3, as Davidson's starting to look overworked. And they actually get some playing time to rookie call-up Doug Storied. Crazy thing is, Gilbert finally broke back in the lineup again, in on all 3 goals with a notch and 2 assists. While Vickers had a goal and a helper, and Espo had 2 assists. But the Rangers roared back with a tight 2-0 win over the Stars. Davidson with a 19-save shutout, Vickers and Fairbairn with the goals. And then a thrilling win over the Pittsburgh Penguins at home as well, 4-3. They actually led 4-1, but then in the third period, former Ranger legend Vic Hatfield with 2 goals, closed the gap to 1. But either way, it's a big win for the Blue Shirts. Walt Tkachuk plays his best game of the year, 3 assists. Vadnais, Johnson, and Stemkowski each have a goal and a helper. Davidson faces a lot of action, stops 33 shots. Happy Festivus for the rest of us. The Rangers look great, and they're going to ring in New Year's Eve with another humiliating loss to the Flames, 8-1 at the Garden. The fans boo in frustration. Davidson is pulled after letting in 4 goals. Sodar comes in and lets in another 4. Holland gets the only goal for the Rangers. Espo was awful here, as were Greshner, Tkachuk, and Fairbairn. Doug Jarrett was a -6. He's lucky he's not taking a minor league assignment after that one. Terrible way to end what was otherwise a pretty good month overall. Well, as I said before, it was a good month until the losing started again. But overall, it was the sharpest they've looked all season so far. They go 6-4-2 in December of 1975, but still sit dead last. An overall record of 15-18-4 at 37 games. As we approach the halfway point, sitting at 34 points. It's why those losses to the Flames hurt bad even more so, as they too came alive in December, as they now sit far ahead of the Rangers by 8 points in the final playoff spot for the division. The Islanders are also well ahead, and the Flyers are just plain running away with it. To no surprise, the new arrivals actually did very well in their first month as Rangers, first full month that is. Phil Esposito led the way in scoring as he was incredible in that hot streak. 3 goals, 11 assists, 14 points in all 12 games. He's showing sparks of his old self again, but obviously it's a much different environment than Boston that he's used to, as he finished a pretty bad -9. That was tied for team worst. But coming in second is Steve Vickers, as he led the team in goals this month with 6, adding 4 assists, totaling 10 points, and again played tremendously in that hot streak. But was very bad in many of the losses. He was a -7, and he also played in all 12 games. And coming in third is the other new star on the team, Carl Vadnais. In all 12 games, the defenseman had 2 goals, 7 assists for 9 points. It was a very good +2, and played excellently throughout the month, and was key in many wins, including his insane performance over the Capitals. Well, Rod Gilbert returns from injury and is finding his groove again. Pete Stemkowski actually had an excellent month. Middleton was tremendous in the hot streak, but pretty bad in the losing streak. Tkachuk had a couple big outings. Dillon played a couple great games, but didn't really have a great month. Fairbairn was coming off of, pretty good this month. And Collins was in the action he saw. Paulus was decent. Hickey was hurt for quite some time, but big credit to minor league call-ups Eddie Johnstone and Jerry Holland, who played very well this month in the action they saw. Of course, we already know Carl Vadnais leads the team in defensive scoring with his 9 points. It was Gilles Marotte who co-led the team with a +4, along with Eddie Johnstone, the determined minor league call-up forward who, of course, we won't see again after the next couple games, played extremely well in certain situations. But Marotte continues to be a workhorse and a leader for the Rangers, as he and Vadnais were indeed the best defensemen this month in a core that still has several flaws. Nick Beverly was out of action for a while, but he actually did look sharp upon his return toward the end of the month. Bednarski was pretty damn bad. Greshner, again, played great in some games and was awful in others, and he was tied for the team worst -9 with Espo. Doug Jarrett was actually awesome during the unbeaten streak, but had a terrible end of the month. Sakharuk was nothing to write home about, and this defense just can't rely on these 2 guys all season. John Davidson played every single game for this month for the Rangers, starting every one of them. He played some sensational outings, and again was at his best in the hot streak. His numbers are among some of the best they've been so far this season. 6-4-2, 3.39 goals against average, and .890 save percentage, despite a rough end of the month. And he also garnered another shutout. Doug Sodar actually saw some action for the first time this year, subbing in for JD a couple games, and he wasn't very good at all. He didn't get credited with any of the losses, so he has no record at this time, but he's a dreadful 6.25 goals against average and a very bad .861 save percentage. Not promising. Either way, can the Rangers' recent spark ignite them to something further? It is not a happy new year to ring in 1976. First, it was an 8-6 loss to the Leafs at home. Davidson is utterly awful in net. 8 goals on 22 shots. But it actually gets worse. He fractured his left leg. Things just going bad to worse for the Rangers. The only bright spots were Carl Vadnais, who had an epic night with his second career hat-trick, adding an assist for a 4-point evening. And Rod Gilbert had a 4-point night himself with 2 goals and 2 assists, as both Stemmer and Tkachuk each had 2 assists. And the following game in St. Louis, against the Blues, Sutter gets the first start of his career and stops 30 shots out of 35. Squester and Stemkowski score a goal each in a 5-2 loss, bringing their losing streak to 3 in a row. And the Rangers' upper brass is fed up at long last, and I'm not talking about Emile Francis anymore. Ron Stewart is dismissed as head coach as the team sits at 15-20-4 under his tutelage. The team just has no focus. He's not connecting with his players or not responding to them in any way, shape, or form. Some say in hindsight he was never given a fair chance, but he actually ran into similar issues in Los Angeles a couple years after this, what would be his last coaching job of his career. Rangers fans weren't exactly sad to see him go at this time either. But that wasn't all. Emile Francis was relieved of his duties as general manager. This one was a shocker. It truly was the end of an era. 12 years. Yes, obviously the video shows the more downhill part of his tenure and how it had become. But this man was a visionary. And he took a team that was laying in the weeds for what seemed like an eternity and brought them back to prominence and contendership. Tension began mounting between he and Rangers club president William Jennings. Francis was willing to retake the reins as coach from Stewart, but Jennings didn't want the cap back in both roles again, feeling it was counterproductive, and truly felt his whole time with this team was up. He gave him the chance to resign, but in true Emile Francis fashion, he said no to that, and that he never takes the easy way out, and his mindset was, if you're going to fire me, fire me. While Rangers fans had turned on Francis, they and the media still seemed very thankful for all he had done and positively for the organization, and that can't be disputed. But now for the replacement as general manager and coach, and it will be one person. And that's the man known as Fergie, John Ferguson. During his short yet memorable playing career for the Montreal Canadiens in 8 seasons, he amassed 303 points in 500 games, was a career plus 83, and also amassed 1,216 penalty minutes as he displayed grit, toughness, and pugnacious antics that made him extremely popular among fans in Montreal, and he won 5 Stanley Cups. His leadership qualities perhaps meant management and coaching might have been in his future, as he was indeed the assistant coach for Team Canada in the infamous 1972 Summit Series against the Soviets. In the last few years, he'd been focusing on other sports and business ventures. And this puzzled many due to his lack of experience, but apparently it was rumored he and Jennings had been in contact about bringing him into the Rangers organization in some capacity for quite some time. And now, he's handling both duties, and at 37 years old, much like Francis before him, is considered to be very young for this role. And hey, Fergie has a good effect on his team to start things off as they snap that awful 3-game skid and double up on the Kansas City Scouts 8-4 in KC. A huge effort from just about everyone up and down. Espo, 2 goals and an assist for 3 points. Gilbert, 3 assists. He's just proven to be an ageless wonder. Marat, Middleton, and Tkachuk each with a goal and a helper, and Sutter gets his first career win. And then they stunned the Chicago Blackhawks in the Windy City with a monster 6-2 win. The Rangers were like a firing squad on Philly boy's brother, Tony O. And a big game from Walt Tkachuk, 2 goals. Vickers, who had been in a slump the last few games, came alive with a goal and a helper. Rod Gilbert had a goal and an assist as well, as Marat had 2 apples. Dunk Wilson played in his first game in well over a month, and he was fantastic in net. 31 saves on 33 shots. Yes, the John Ferguson era is off to a roaring start. Truly a whole new looking team in terms of their on-ice product. And God, who the f*** am I kidding? 3 losses in a row. First the Canucks, who are starting to improve a bit since their bad start. The Rangers get destroyed 5-1. Fairbairn with the only goal. Vadnais and Marat played their worst outings yet this season. Rough night for Wilson and net to boot. And then they get shut out 7-0 by the f***ing Seals. It's bad enough losing to them, but allowing 7 goals again from a team in the bottom third of scoring in the league and not being able to score anything on them. Bednarski was lucky he didn't get sent down to the minors for his performance in this one. Wilson let in those goals on 31 shots, and then they proceeded to drop an 8-3 loss to the struggling Penguins. Vadnais with 2 assists, Wilson and Sutter each letting in 4 goals. 20 goals in 3 games they've allowed. And now we can't underestimate what John Davidson means to this team more than ever. And the response to these disastrous outings is just crazy. Many Vancouver fans were quoted as saying, "Hey Espo, complain about us booing ya now, ya bum." A member of the Oakland sports media said, "What a glorious win for our Seals. And on the glorious occasion on the day we found out that we actually have a hockey team, no less." And Ranger legend Vic Hadfield, now with the Penguins, said, "I miss you too, Roddy." Okay, I have no evidence any of those things were said, but pretty realistic if you ask me. But finally, the Rangers catch a break. The All-Star break, that is, as the 29th annual NHL All-Star Game emanates from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, PA, at the famed Spectrum on January 20th, 1976. And the Rangers, despite this rocky season, get 2 representatives to play for the Campbell Conference. Carl Vande makes his 5th All-Star Game appearance and first as a Ranger, and Steve Vickers makes his 2nd straight and overall midseason showdown. And down 7-4 as the third period was winding down, All-Star Denny Potvin began a rush that led to the stick of Blues Ironman Gary Unger, who sets up Steve Vickers. And he closes the gap to 7-5, but the Campbells still lose by that same margin. Now back to our regularly scheduled embarrassing failures. Well, okay. They didn't lose upon returning the action. They actually tied the Chicago Blackhawks, and it was a very hard-earned tie. They were down 3-1 in the third period, and Wayne Dillon, who has been pretty bad so far this month, scored to close the gap with under 5 minutes to play. With time winding down, just 20 seconds left, Phil Esposito comes up in the clutch, and the Garden goes crazy. It's the loudest they've been in forever, and that indeed seals the tie, 3-3, and it's former Rangers All-Star goaltender Gilles Villemere who's the victim this go-round. Vickers had a great game as well. 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, while Espo and Dillon, the comeback goal-scoring heroes, each had a goal and a helper. This is a good momentum getter, and their next opponent? Yes, the Washington Capitals, the cream of the crop, the sophomore sissies, the worst thing to hit Washington since the Senators baseball team. If you think this Rangers team is bad, try this club with 3 wins all season, and they're currently on a 25-game winless streak. Sad days indeed. Easy tune-up game for the Rangers to get a win, and what in the blue name of every member of the Patrick family is this? They not only lose the Cavs, they lose 7-5. They allow 7 goals from a team who will score the 3rd least in the league all year. One of the NHL's worst winless skids of all time, one of the worst teams of all time, and they broke that slump on this night. Ugh. Well, Middleton had 2 goals, Dillon and Vickers had a goal and a helper each, and Gilbert had 2 assists. Coach GM John Ferguson was interviewed after the game and said, "This was not in the job description." Well, okay, he didn't say that, but you can imagine a shock and dismay at this one. Things can't get any worse. And hey, they don't. Because this time they actually lose to a decent team. Dropping a 4-1 loss to the LA Kings, Gilbert scoring the only goal. And wow, hey, they managed to tie the Sabres yet again. 3-3. Espo with a big game. A goal, 2 helpers for 3 points. And on all the goals, Gilbert has a goal and assist. But this is still what it is. A 7-game winless streak. And on this streak, the Rangers allowed 37 goals. That's 5.3 goals a game. Utterly disastrous run here. And they scored 1.9 goals a game, not even 2. So the problems here were up and down the roster. The talent is clearly there. The cohesiveness is not. They do finally end the winless skid with an impressive 6-3 win over the Blues. Dillon plays a beauty, a goal, 2 assists for 3 points. He's really come on. Gilbert has 2 goals. Holt has 2 assists. Sudo Vadne and Marat, who were awful during that winless streak. And Wilson put on a good performance in net with 33 saves. But it was right back to losing, 6-4, this time to Toronto. Gilbert remains hot with 2 more goals, as does Dillon with a goal and assist, while Vickers has 2 assists. So we finally end this miserable month. And yes, a truly abysmal month it was for the Rangers. It seemed they might be turning a corner in December, but now they went 3-8 8-2 in 13 games in January 76 and bring themselves to 18-26-6 for a mere 42 points. Now sit 13 points back of the Atlanta Flames for the third and final playoff spot in the division. What a sad state of affairs this team is in. The dismissal of Stewart and Francis adds fuel to an inferno of failure. Ferguson is not off to a good start either. 30 games to go. Can they fight to keep their postseason streak alive? Despite how bad the Rangers were, however, Rod Gilbert was their most consistent forward all month. He was actually quite excellent. 10 goals, 10 assists for 20 points in 13 games. It was a passable -1. Even as he plays in his 14th full season and at 34 years old, he proves to be as reliable as ever, even without the line mates that he's been working with for many years. Phil Esposito is second in team scoring with 6 goals and 9 assists for 15 points in all 13 games as well, and played in some amazing outings, actually. The winless skid did hit him hard a few games, and he was a pretty bad -8. Defenseman Carl Vadnais is once again third in scoring this month with 4 goals, 8 assists for 12 points. Good on the score sheet, which included that hat-trick he had to start the month, and played some really great games, but on the winless skid, he had some very bad games. After being a +2 last month, he was a -10. Team worse. Well, Wayne Dillon, after a bad start to the month, really got his wheels spinning and played very well through the rest of the month. Vickers had some consistency issues, but still produced well more often than not. It wasn't a very good month for Middleton and Stankowski, who were both really good last month. Kachuk played well, and Fairbairn was good somewhat often. Bill Collins, who returned to action after a lengthy absence, looked decent enough upon his return. Hollis had his good moments. Hickey wasn't that good upon his return whatsoever. And Holland, who really worked hard last month, didn't do too well this month. Well, as once again he realized for the second straight month, Vadnais leads the team in defensive scoring, but he was not their best defenseman this month, as Nick Beverly played very well for the most part and shares the team lead for the month in plus-minus with a +2 along with rookie forward Wayne Dillon. Jean Moreau, who had been playing great for most of the season this year, had his worst month, despite actually producing on the score sheet more often than he usually does. Bednarski had his best month yet this season, played pretty solidly with the exception of a bad start. Greshner even played pretty consistently more than he has this season, but he had missed a few games due to injury. Doug Jarrett missed a lot of action and didn't really do well upon his return. Sakaru continues to be not much use. And now to the goalies. This was a huge problem. John Davidson may be far from perfect, but he's certainly better than his teammates. Sadly, Davidson's leg injury left things in the hands primarily of Dunk Wilson, who went 2-6-2 with a terrible 4.46 goals against average and a very bad 861 save percentage. And you know what? I do feel for rookie Doug Stoddard, however, who was thrust into a position he definitely wasn't ready to undertake. Despite making 4 appearances, he was 1-1-0, but was a terrible 5.34 goals against average and an equally awful 843 save percentage. I should be noted, though, if I'm being fair here, Davidson's only appearance this month was horrid, letting in 8 goals and a truly and utterly downright pathetic and inexcusable 636 save percentage in that game. The month started out well enough with a 3-2 win over the Stars at home. Sakarik was the unlikely hero in that one with a goal and assist. The goal was the game winner. And good news, they just found out John Davidson is clear to return. Bad news, the Rangers had the Islanders right where they want them the next game, leading 3-0 and collapsed in a 6-5 loss. Davidson is terrible in his return, 4 goals on 10 shots. Sakarik stays hot, 2 goals, 2 assists for a 4-point night. Espel also has a great night with a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. Vickers has a goal and a helper. Then against the Red Wings, what a night for Rod Gilbert! 4 goals! His 7th and what would be his final career hat-trick. Vickers helps out with 3 assists. Davidson is much better here despite letting in 4 goals. He has bombarded and stopped 37 shots in a 5-4 Rangers win. And hey, New Yorkers finally showing some life. And then they flatline with a 3-game losing streak. But to be fair, it was against the mighty Habs at first. 3-0 shutout loss. Davidson still played very well on that, stopping 30 shots of 33 and making some epic stops. And the Rangers, to their credit, did fire in a lot on Ken Dryden. Then a home-and-home with 2-time defending cup champion Flyers didn't make it any easier, and they'd get destroyed in Philly, 6-1. Davidson faces 46 shots. Vadnais has the lone goal. Middleton and Collins were awful here, and Espo had a rough night. They put up a much better effort against the Bullies at home, but still lose 5-3. Vickers with 2 assists. Davidson facing 51 shots. This team's defense has been a mess in this run. The Rangers, however, did get a win over the sucky Scouts, this time 5-1. Espo with another 3-point night, 2 goals and a helper. Gilbert continues to soar with 2 assists, while Middleton, after some rough outings, roars back with 2 assists. Paulus has also played well lately, and JD plays huge in net with a 25-save performance. Oh boy. But on February 17th, 1976, another showdown with their hated rivals, the New York Islanders. This team is on the verge of big things. Their trek towards prominence is secured by that of superstar sensation Denny Potvin on defense. Up front, they have rookie star Brian Trottier at center and youngsters such as Clark Gillies and Bobby Nystrom up front, as well as some reliable veterans and the goaltending tandem of Chico Resch and Batlin Billy Smith, the latter of whom gets the start today. The Rangers thus far have been unable to beat the Islanders, who Rangers fans are truly despised for even existing. We're on the island for this one, and the first period gets underway, and the Rangers are playing a very focused game, but the Isles defense, along with Billy Smith making big stops, aren't letting them get the goal. However, John Davidson, on the other hand, is playing superbly in net. No way, Trottier. Bad call, Westfall. You are silly, Gillies, if you think you're gonna get one on JD. And the first period indeed ends scoreless, 0-0. The second period gets underway, and 2:25 in. Middleton picks up a loose puck. He's got Hickey with him. And now, Ricky to Hickey for the goal. And the Rangers strike first and draw first blood in this one. 1-0 they lead. Davidson is keeping the league protected. I made another save, Dave. Bye-bye, Bobby Nye. Hate to be rude, Jude. And with nearly 4 minutes left in the period, the Isles cough out the puck in the neutral zone. Middleton steals it. He's going in on Smith. He scores! Rick Middleton, a solo beauty. 20th goal of the season to boot. What a game he's having today, and he gives the Rangers a 2-0 lead, and they carry that lead into intermission. In the third period, the Rangers are doing everything they can to hold on to try and build the lead. But the Isles do get a power play marker near the midway point of the period, cut the Rangers' lead to 2-1. But the Rangers are working their asses off. This game means a lot to them, but Davidson, be it the glove, the blocker, the stick, the pad, the skate, his body, he's there to make the save. Time is winding down. 1 minute to play. 1 minute. And the Rangers aren't losing their focus as the Isles add an extra attacker and pull Smith. We're down to 10 seconds. Is it truly happening? 5 seconds. With 3 seconds left. Fairbairn clears it out, and Stemmer gets the empty netter, and the Rangers win it 3-1. What a glorious victory over their hated crosstown rivals. And John Davidson, who has had a rocky road like many of his teammates, is named first star with perhaps his best clutch performance all season. He earned it in this one, no doubt, with his 32 saves against a powerful club. And what a game for young Rick Middleton, a goal and a helper, both in which he made huge plays with. Tremendous game for him. Isles goalie Billy Smith is the third star, but the Rangers at least tasted some great glory in a year that is ringing very little. And the next game? The team that handed them one of their most humiliating losses of the year, the Washington Capitals. And they have only won 2 games since they beat the Rangers. Well, we'll see if the Blue Shirts can get a measure of revenge here. And that starts out bad as the Caps score just 59 seconds into the game, silencing the MSG crowd. But close to 6 minutes later, Gilbert gets the puck. He's got Vickers with him, and Vickers centers it for Wayne Dillon, who scores, tying the game for the Rangers at 1 apiece. And just 3.5 minutes later, on a power play, Gilbert steers it, gives the wheel over to Vickers again. He can't find an opening, so he finds Greshner at the point, who slaps it home and scores, giving the Rangers a 2-1 lead. The Caps would tie it, however, and it's 2-2 after the first period. The second period gets underway, both teams looking for the go-ahead marker early, and just 3:19 in, Vickers makes a play getting into the blue line to Beverly, who puts it down on goal for Rod Gilbert, and the Rangers take the lead 3-2, and Vickers and Gilbert have been in on all 3 goals so far. And then near the halfway point of the period, Dillon goes in on goal with Gilbert. Roddy can't get it, but Steve Vickers does. And wow, Gilbert and Vickers had their 4th point each of the game. Again, in on all 4 goals. What an incredible outing this is, but we are far from finished. Just 1:04 later, a new course strikes as Stimkowski passes up to Paulus, who makes a nice pass to Fairbairn. And then, nearly 3 minutes later, Rod to Wayne to Steve Vickers, his second goal, his 5th point for he and Gilbert. This is incredible, as the atmosphere at the Garden is electric on this night, and the Rangers lead it 6-2. Gilbert and Vickers are owning the night. The Caps, however, did get one back just over a minute later, but then 2:12 left in the period. Power play. Greshner up to Vickers to Esposito. Philly boys' first point of the game, and Vickers 6th. And the Rangers lead 7-3 after 2 periods. And as the night progressed, people began to realize Vickers was having quite the historic night. The franchise record for goals in a game by a Rangers player is 6, and it's shared, set first by Frank Boucher in 1930, then tied by Bill Cook in 1933, then tied again by Don Raleigh in 1951, and Vickers had just tied the record just a few days past the 25th anniversary of Raleigh's mark. So far in this game, he has 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points, and the announcer makes it known that he has tied the record over the PA and on television and over the radio, adding more excitement to the atmosphere at MSG and across the Big Apple. And there's still one whole period to play. As the 3rd period gets underway, Espo is trying the puck. He gets to Middleton, who sets up Hickey for the goal. Just 1:13 into the 3rd. And the Rangers absolutely just decimating the Caps here, leading 8-3. But every time Vickers gets the puck, the crowd cheers loudly. They want him to make history on this night. The Caps get one back, cutting the gap to 8-4. Then nearly 3 minutes later, Espo staying alive as is Middleton's, and Philly sets up Ricky for the goal, making it 9-4 for the Rangers. And this crowd is still loud, but they're getting anxious, so they really want to see Vickers get the record. Then exactly 3 minutes after Middleton's goal, Vadnais begins to play. Dylan has it. It's up to Dylan to make the play. And he sees Steve Vickers. He did it. Not only does he score his 6th career hat trick already in his career, he scores point number 7 in this game. The roof nearly blows off Madison Square Garden in joy. Vickers is congratulated by his teammates for setting the new team record, and the MSG faithful give him a well-deserved standing ovation, making this season finally worth something truly special. Count it up. 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. A new franchise record. Steve Vickers on this night etched his legacy as a Rangers icon. An unforgettable night for fans in attendance. And those watching on TV or listening to the radio broadcast while hard at work gave Rangers fans something to be overjoyed and happy about in what it has been a very unhappy and joyless time. What started out as a regular game, just hoping to get a measure of revenge for a previous humiliating loss, turned out to be one of the most historic and memorable nights in New York Rangers history. As of November 30th, 2025, Vickers still holds that team record. And now, unheralded rookie Dave Maloney clears the look up to Espo as the game is not over, who sets up at Hickey for a 2nd goal of the game. It's 11-4 Rangers, and that's how it would end. Well, I'd say to the surprise of literally no one, and that includes people who never watched a game of hockey in their life or even heard of the game of hockey, knows that Vickers gets a curtain call as the game's first start and gets another well-deserved standing ovation from the adoring fans at Madison Square Garden. But also a huge night for Rod Gilbert. A goal, 4 assists, 5 points, and a +5. He's named 2nd star. Wayne Dillon, what a game for him. A goal, 3 assists, 4 points, also a +5, named 3rd star. Espo also had a 4-point night with a goal and 3 assists. Hickey had 2 goals. Middleton and Greshner each had a goal and a helper. And rookie Dave Maloney was a +5, as was Nick Beverly. The Rangers have shown a lot of spark in this little streak here, and has actually shown quite a bit in this month, despite that skid there. And this is the most, however, they've shown since their unbeaten streak earlier in the season. But it's back to reality. 4 straight losses. They did, however, put up a fight against the mighty Habs, including coming back from a 3-0 deficit to tie the game, but ultimately lose 5-3. Espo, Vadnais, and Gilbert with the goals. Greshner plays really well in this one to boot with a +3, Maloney and Beverly played the complete opposite as they did in the Washington game. Then it was a bad 5-2 loss to the Bruins. Vickers and Dillon with the goals, and Davidson had been brutal the last couple games. And look, another loss to the f***ing Seals, 6-4. Vadnais with the goal and a helper, Vickers with 2 assists. And then they lose to the f***ing Stars, who are pretty damn bad, 5-3. Davidson has allowed 20 goals in 4 games. Hollis has a goal and an assist in this one. And the comments started again. Habs captain Ivan Cornway said, "Fergie is a friend, so we were gentle." Rangers legend Jean Rattel, ever the gentleman, said about the Bruins' victory as he now plays for Beantown, "My 2 assists came with deep hesitation." Seals forward Dennis Maruk said, "We need more games like this. I don't want to move somewhere crappy like Cleveland or somewhere cold like Minnesota, but I can thank my lucky stars I'm not in Washington." And veteran Stars goalie Cesar Maniago says, "This winning thing is fun. I could really get used to this." Now, okay, none of those things were actually said. At least I don't have evidence that there was, but I don't doubt those thoughts were there. But it can only get better. And it does! The Rangers managed not to lose, and actually put up a great fight in a leap year battle with the Habs. Davidson was amazing in net, 39 saves on 40 shots, as he and Dryden put on a goaltending showcase. Gilbert gets the goal for the Rangers. However, despite the spirited effort, the fact remains they are still winless in 5 going into the final month of the season. I guess the Rangers did better in February of '76 than they did in January. That's like comparing 2 bad restaurants and saying one wins out because the napkins are better. They go 5-8-1 here, and they did have some excellent games, including Vickers' of course unforgettable night. Their record moves to 23-34-7 for 53 points. The only saving grace, I guess, is being that the Flames had a pretty bad month, and the Rangers are now just 10 points back of a final playoff spot with 16 games to go. Anything's possible. Steve Vickers leads the way in scoring this month with an incredible February with 5 goals, 16 assists for 21 points in all 14 games. And yes, a third of his points did come in one game with that historic 7-point night, but he was still consistently producing for the Rangers. Coming in second is Rod Gilbert. Speaking of consistent, he's been consistent all year it seems. He equaled his totals from last month with 10 goals, 10 assists for 20 points in all 14 games, and he too had a quarter of his points come in that very same game. He also was an excellent +6. Coming in third is Espo. Phil Esposito, 6 goals, 10 assists, 16 points, 14 games. Producing consistently, but was a bad -8. Wayne Dillon continues to progress in his first NHL season, and he had a really good month. Stamkowski and Fairbairn were solid. Paulus was a good hand. Hickey showed some improvement. Middleton had some great games, but he himself is still fine-tuning his overall games. He had some pretty bad ones, too. Kachuk was not so much bad as he was just seemingly absent. Collins was absolutely awful, however. Either way, better month overall for the forwards than we were used to. Vickers' +7 led the team for the month of February, and that's very little surprise, all things considered. On defense, surprise, surprise! Carl Vadnais leads the team again with 5 goals, 4 assists for 9 points, but I will say overall he did improve from his rough go in many games last month and was significantly better. But the big surprise this month on defense was rookie call-up Dave Maloney, who played very well, subbing in for injured Gilles Marot. And Ron Greshner had his best month so far this year and was only a point behind Vadnais in scoring, and his overall defensive games seem to be improving. Sakharov played very well early on, but sadly battled injuries late in the month. Nick Beverly played excellently in many games, but Narski and Jarrett weren't that great in the action they saw, however. This defense still needs a lot of fine-tuning. And John Davidson, as we get to the goalies, returned to action. Despite a seemingly not so good, and really isn't, 4-8-1 record and a rough start upon his return, in his wins and the one tie against the Habs, and I have to say, and point out his performance against the Islanders as well. He was outstanding in many games. Despite his 3.98 goals against average and 85 save percentage, he did show he's a better choice of any goalie they have right now, but thanks to slim pickings, he might get a little overworked sometimes. However, Dunk Wilson played in 3 games, and he did win one without any losses or ties, but he too battled injury issues this month, and it's clearly known that Sodart isn't ready yet. But Wilson did have an excellent 2.39 goals against average and 923 save percentage in his limited action in February. But the lack of wins progressed as we hit March, as the winless streak that ended February seeped into March. It became a 9-game winless streak. They should have beaten the Canucks as they were leading 3-2 with time winding down, but Vancouver tied it with 25 seconds left, and they had to settle for a 3-3 draw, which is too bad because John Davidson played well in net with 31 saves. Gilbert had 2 helpers, and Espo had a goal and assist. Then it was a home-and-home series against the Atlanta Flames, who they really needed to beat. Gilles Moreau returns, but the Flames embarrassed the Rangers 8-3. Davidson and Wilson get the Rangers split, as we now call it. Each allowed 4 goals. Gilbert had a goal and assist, but was a -4. Vickers was also pretty bad here. And then they had to settle for a 6-6 tie at home, where they did erase a 6-4 deficit. Vickers rebounded with 2 goals and a helper. Middleton, Hickey, and Dillon each had a goal and a helper. Bednarski and Gilbert each had 2 assists. Davidson faced 49 shots, making 43 saves. Then it was a heartbreaking loss to the Kings. The Rangers led 3-2 after 2 periods, but lost 4-3. Hickey had 3 helpers. Middleton had a goal and 2 helpers for 3 points. Vadnais had a goal and an assist. Davidson stopped 33 shots. They finally ended the 9-game winless skid with a monster 7-3 win over the Canucks. Wayne Dillon, his first career hat-trick. An epic game for the youngster, while Vickers stays hot with a goal, 2 helpers, and 3 points and a +4. And the Suns-Bruins duo of Vadnais and Espo each have a goal and assist. The former played actually extremely well in this one, had a +5, while Hickey, Greshner, and Gilbert each have 2 assists. Davidson with 39 saves on 42 shots, just what they need. And their playoff hopes hang on by a thread, and they... Another loss to the Capitals, this time 5-2. As Caps goalie Ron Lowe suddenly decided to do a Tony Esposito impersonation on this night, stopped 36 shots. Speaking of Esposito's, Espo reaches 30 goals for the 9th straight season. Gilbert gets another goal. Next. Oh, hey, they managed to beat a shitty team this time. The North Stars, 3-1. Davidson managed to have a great game with 29 saves. Greshner, Hickey, and Gilbert with the goals. But the Rangers sit 13 points back of a playoff spot. They don't need a miracle. And they don't get it, as they suck a massive meat rocket and lose 4 straight, killing any slight glimmer of playoff hope they may have had. First, the Bruins humiliate them 8-1. Davidson's pathetic in net. Vadnais getting the lone goal against his former team while playing what might have been one of the worst games of his career. -6. Rattel with 4 points for the Bruins. Dillon was atrocious to boot. Vickers might have played his worst game of the year in this one. Greshner and Paulus score a goal each in a 4-2 loss to the Pens. Vadnais continues to struggle, and clearly overworked Davidson has made this stop 32 of 36 shots. And then a 7-3 loss to Buffalo. The Rangers have actually played reasonably well against this year. Davidson faced 52 shots. Look, they're not making the playoffs. This would be the right time to actually give Sodart some ice time. Have him adjust to the bigs a little more. Esposito had 2 goals. Vadnais continues to suck. Gilbert then gets the lone goal in a 4-1 loss to Philly. And look, Davidson in it again, facing 40 shots, stopping 36. Greshner and Jarrett should be hit with a Fergie fist after their performances. Well, Rattel was quoted after the Bruins when saying, "This was me showing mercy. If I didn't have sympathy for my former team, I would have broke Siller's record tonight." Vic Hatfield of the Pens said, "I don't miss you anymore, Roddy. You guys suck." Sabres GM Punch and Lark decided to remind Rangers fans, "Nah, nah, 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 we got Bathgate," reminiscing about his good days as Leafs coach. During the Flyers defeated the Rangers, Philly captain Bobby Clark said to Coach Fred Shiro, "Do you think Bob sounds more distinguished?" Well, again, I don't have any evidence of this, but I still think it's pretty logical to think. But then, hey! A 3-game winning streak, an impressive one at that. A hard-fought 6-5 win over the Hawks, who have been struggling as of late this season. Vadnais, Vickers, and Espo with a goal and a helper each. Rob plays his best game in a while. And then a 4-2 win over the Colorado Rockies. Whoops, I'm jumping the gun there. Kansas City Scouts. Doug Sutter gets the start as Davidson finally gets some rest. And the rookie is very impressive here. 32 saves in the win. Stemmer had 3 assists. Vadnais and Paulus had a goal and a helper each. And then a huge win over the Islanders again. 3-1. Davidson, great net, 28 saves. Paulus, Hickey, Vadnais with the goals. And indeed a moral victory if there ever was one, as they stick it to those fat cats on the island in the first part of the home and home series, as we have a couple games in April. The Rangers' pride shines, and yeah, they get toasted 10-2 by those same Islanders. Vickers, Vadnais, Esposito, Gilbert, Davidson, and Sodard are so embarrassed that they're actually wishing it was a home game. Not because they want to be humiliated in front of their fans, but that way they can borrow the paper bags Rangers fans are wearing over their heads. It was so bad that a hockey coach out of a small Ontario hicktown received a tape and was asked to analyze the game and provide expertise. And he had this to say for his consensus. It's f***ing embarrassing! Rumor is he kicked a trash bin in frustration. Anyway, yeah, let's just end this, shall we? And yeah, this season mercifully comes to an end, but it looks bleak as hell as they faced a two-time defending Cup champion Philadelphia Flyers at home, who enter the game with a record of 51 wins, 12 losses, and 16 ties. And it looks even worse ahead for the Rangers as two-time Vezina winner Bernie Perron, who's been injured most of the year, gets the start. And coach Freddie the Fog Shiro is still dressing his big guns tonight. Davidson gets the start in this one. The Rangers, however, to their credit, are not going to roll over and die. They are wanting to end the season at least on a high note, give their fans something to take home with them. But Davidson is facing pressure early on, but is not giving anything up. And then, on a power play, 8:28 in, Roddy, back to Stemmer, who sets up for Stevie, his 30th goal this season, his 4th straight overall season reaching that mark, and the Rangers lead 1-0. Davidson, however, is playing like it's Game 7 of a playoff series. Save after save after save, disarming the rifle of Reggie. Thanks for coming, Mr. Bridgman. And the Rangers carry a 1-0 lead in intermission. And in the second period, Davidson is still a wall in that he cannot be solved. The Flyers are throwing everything they have at him. I'm ready for the kill, Bill. You've been stuck, Kindrachuk. Not good enough. Good enough? And they head into the second intermission, still leading 1-0. The third period starts, and with every save JD makes, the crowd is cheering louder and louder as he's putting on his proudest performance yet this season. Time is winding down. With 4:26 left, Fairbairn fights for the puck, getting it to Kachuk. He sets up Greg Polis to make it 2-0. And indeed, the tie keeps ticking on. The Rangers fans, despite all of the hardship, give a respectful applause and cheer their Rangers able to end the season on a high note as they hang on a beat the powerful two-time defending Cup champion Philadelphia Flyers 2-0. A moral victory to end the season. Rangers teammates mob John Davidson for his epic performance of 38 saves, his 3rd shutout of the season. And Rangers fans give him a massive ovation when he's named first star of the game. And I believe, truly, it wasn't just for his performance on this night, but for all the hard work and the bull crap he had to put up with this year. The hardship, the injuries, even the failures. He worked tirelessly game after game. And with that, the Rangers can at least skate out of MSG with their heads held high in a low season. Well, final month of the season. 14 games in March and 2 in April. The Rangers were 6-8-2, and if I'm being honest, it was probably one of their better months this year. And they did play some great games here, I can't dispute that, but that losing streak was rough. Be that as it may, they finished the season 29-42-9. A very bad record. And for the first time since the 1965-66 season, the Rangers will not be making a trip to the playoffs. For the 3rd time this season, however, Rod Gilbert leads the month in scoring out of the 6. He scored 5 goals, 11 assists for 16 points, literally averaging a point a game, and once again displayed top-level consistency that he's always been known for. He was a pretty bad -11, but the Rangers allowed a lot of goals this month, so that's to be expected. But either way, he has been in the top 3 in scoring every month, minus November and December, and remember, he battled injuries around that time. Coming in second in scoring is the man called Espo. 9 goals, 6 assists for 15 points, and a -9. But since joining the team on November 7th, he has made the top 3 in every month but November, his first month with the team when he missed 5 games. He even led the team in scoring in December. And coming in third in scoring, defenseman Carl Vadnais. The star blue liner had 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points, and -7. Vadnais, however, despite being really bad on that one losing streak, had been a major asset for the Rangers since joining them along with Espo. He has made the top 3 in scoring 3 times. Steve Vickers again produced his well on the score sheet, but had some pretty rough games. But the big surprises among the scorers this month was actually Pat Hickey. He had his best month all season. When it comes to two-way play, however, Pete Stemkowski had his best month of the year and played extremely well. Wayne Dillon had a couple excellent games, including that big hat-trick, but was not overly productive overall. Fairbairn was decent, Collins improved, Middleton had a handful of great games and a handful of really bad ones. Kachuk again seemed somewhat absent, but still played okay in a couple games. Oh hey, big shock! Carl Vadnais, of course, leads the defense in scoring yet again, with his 14 points, as he has led the team every month since joining them in November. He did have a better month overall and played in some great games despite, again, as I mentioned, some disastrous outings. The only month he actually shared the lead with someone this season was his first month with the team in November, and shared it with Gilles Morot, who this month led the team in plus-minus, as he was the only Ranger player this month to make it on the plus side with his +3. And he did play excellently out of the 11 and 16 games he suited up for, as Furey kept shuffling the defensive lineup due to the injury to Sakharuk. Morot, who led in plus-minus once before this season as well, as he and Vickers are the only two to lead the category twice this season. Greshner, well, he had a couple good games, but was a team worst -13, which actually tied with Vickers, surprisingly. Doug Jarrett wasn't all that great. Rookie Dave Maloney struggled a bit this month, but he still shows some promise. Nick Beverly had his worst month of the season, probably the only truly bad month he had. Bednarski was so-so. And to the goalies, John Davidson, JD, is facing a barrage actually more often than usual this month. He still managed to accumulate a 5-7-2 record. Yeah, okay, his 4.36 goals against average is definitely not much to look at. But in terms of context, when you look at his .883 save percentage, that in itself might be a miracle. He did manage a shutout in his epic end-of-season performance against the Flyers. Rookie Doug Soudart got some work in, and he finished with a 1-1-0 record, and actually played marvelously in his win over the Scouts. But sadly, his next performance wasn't all that great, and it brought down his stats to a bad 4.59 goals against average and an .875 save percentage. Dunk Wilson made a brief appearance in the terrible loss to Atlanta for 2 periods, allowing 4 goals, making his goals against average this month a 6 dead on and a 7.65 save percentage. Well, now we go to the final numbers. The Rangers were down in every category, to little surprise, as their fall from grace did occur. Their offense, however, was one of the more stronger aspects about them, but they did slip pretty bad in overall production, as they had the 5th most goals in the league in the 1974-75 season with 319. This season, they slipped all the way to 11th with 262, 57 less. And they were having goaltending issues last year, as they were allowed 276, which was the 11th least, which not so good, but not exactly awful. But now, with 3 new goalies pretty much, it didn't get much better, as they slipped, giving up the 3rd most in the league with 333. Oddly enough, that's 57 more than last year. Their power play, however, remained pretty strong, but it was the 2nd best in the league last season, and this year it's down to 8th. And obviously that slipped due to the departures of Rattel and Park. Their good penalty kill from last season dropped from 6th all the way down to a measly 14th. Rod Gilbert led the team in scoring this year with 36 goals, 50 assists for 86 points in 70 games, missing 10 due to injury, and was a -8. His 36 goals tied the 2nd best mark of his illustrious career. He truly was the consistent star on this team, always producing at a high level, and never had slumps last overly long. But that was the reputation he had built on his entire career. Crazy to think, however, this is only the 3rd time in his career that he led the Rangers in scoring. Steve Vickers had a very good year, 30 goals, 53 assists for 83 points, didn't miss a single game this season playing in all 80. He has a rough -17. But despite this, Vickers, for the 4th straight year, proved to be another strong asset for the Rangers. And no fan in that era will ever forget his team record 7 points in a single game. Sadly, however, his career would hit a snag as he couldn't stay consistent at times, and later injuries would ultimately end his career at the age of 31 in 1982. However, he still remains one of the most popular players in Rangers history. In third in scoring, the man called Espo, Phil Esposito, a member of that blockbuster trade that brought the scoring phenom from Boston to New York. In 62 games he played since joining them in the trade, he notched 29 goals, 30 assists for 67 points. That's pretty good. And should he could still bring that Espo dominance in some games, but clearly showing that this is a much different region and land than Boston, as this was the first time he didn't finish in the top 10 in league scoring since 1966, and he was still with Chicago. And the first time he failed to reach 40 goals since 1968, which was his first year in Boston. And he was an atrocious minus 38. By far his career worst. He would never reach that bad again. And his previous career worst before this was a +2. That was in his rookie year. But be that as it may, he will be important to this Rangers team going forward, and will spend the remainder of his career there. But what can you say about the rest of this forward core? Lots of hard workers, but can that be of any use anymore at this point? Rick Middleton had a breakout year, and despite some rough games, showed that with progress he can be a superb player. The Rangers didn't see that, however. Not smart. More on that later. Wayne Dillon showed some potential in his first NHL season, but his career sadly fizzled pretty quick too. He was out of the Rangers by 1978, and out of the pros by 1980, and out of the game of hockey by 1982 at just age 27. Another first-year NHLer, Pat Hickey, who didn't play too brilliantly most of the year, actually did come alive towards the end of the season, and was going to have a pretty good career. It would be pretty valuable for the Rangers as one of their top forwards until 1979, but kind of fizzled out a bit after the Rangers traded him away. And he still played in the NHL with other teams until 1985, retiring at 32. Both the Rangers veterans, Stemkowski, Fairbairn, and Kachuk, all very popular fan favorites, and some of them seem to play lesser roles this season or just didn't stay overly consistent. However, I will stand the case for Stemmer. He still proved he could be a pretty good two-way forward this season. He played with the Rangers one more season and played one more year in LA. Then after 967 career NHL games, played one last season in the AHL, retiring from hockey in 1979 at age 36. As for Billy Boy, he was still solid and durable and did play an important role, and he didn't miss a single game, but was traded out of New York the following season, and after 2 seasons with the Stars and a short stint with the Blues, he retired in 1979 at just age 32. Walt, however, not only took a lesser role it seemed, but didn't play much of a role at all this season. He still had some really good games, however, he would have a bit of a comeback the next season, and by the next season after that, he was a bit more like his old self. He retired as a Ranger in 1981 at 34 and remains one of the most popular players in their history. Greg Paulus had some good games this year and played effectively two-way in many of them, but never truly fit in with this club overall, it seemed, and never could get back to the player he was in Pittsburgh. He was in New York by 1978 and out of the NHL by 1980, and retired that same year at just 30 years old. Veteran Bill Collins wasn't all that stellar. He wouldn't be back next year, and after a brief stint in Philly, he finished his career with the Caps in 1978, retiring at 35, but he did have a decent overall career. Call-up Jerry Holland actually showed some potential early on, but fizzled out fast, and never played an NHL game again after this season. Left the game of hockey in 1979 at just 25. However, things worked much better for call-up Eddie Johnstone, who also showed some spark and even led the team in plus-minus 1 month during the season. He would go on to be a huge asset for the Rangers going forward. And lastly, before the trade, we've got to mention the legendary Jean Rattel, who was playing very well in the month of October. And indeed, one Rangers player from this season made the top 10 in quite a few scoring categories. But it was Rattel, who only played 13 games for them this season. And he played 67 for the Bruins. He was tied for 6th in the league in points with 105. Tied for 3rd in assists with 69. 6th in power play goals with 17. Tied for 7th in power play goals on ice for a 59. And 9th in offensive point shares with an 8.0. What a year he had, and he's still going to be very productive for Boston going forward. And he would end his career there. And now we move to defense, and it's fitting that the 2 best of the season are the ones on this graphic leading the way in these categories. Carl Vadnais, yeah, you know it. He led that offensive spark for the Rangers on the blue line, and to his credit, still kept their power play afloat and made it their strongest aspect still this season. He had 20 goals, 30 assists for 50 points in the 64 games he played since the trade. He did struggle in several games and in some stretches, but more often than not, he did produce in a monster way and will be a big part of this team going forward. The only time of the season he didn't lead the team in scoring defensively was the month he didn't play there, October, which was led by Brad Park, who also did very well in Boston and will play in the NHL until 1985. Gilles Moreau, the more traditional style of defensive, was a rock for the Rangers this season, still showing tremendous work ethic and leadership, and again, for plus minus, for the end of season leader, like I do in some of these videos, must have at least played a quarter of a season, or been acquired at the trade deadline with some exceptions. Moreau led with a -3. On this team, however, that's still pretty damn good. And he was also the only player to tie Vadnais in the defensive scoring lead, doing so in November. Moreau did miss 23 games due to injuries and was sometimes scratched late in the season, as it was clear Fergie didn't care much for him at all, despite him being pretty good. And he would only play 47 more NHL games. Now, as for the Blues, he played one season in the WHA, retiring in 1978 at the simple age of 33. He had a solid career overall, though. Ron Greshner is the big man they're hoping will be the Rangers' top defender going forward. He did show some spark in some games, and actually had some outright excellent outings, but he was a team worst. -51. Well, not entirely his fault. That's still just plain horrid. He would have progressed his game as time went on and ended up having a solid career despite injuries and played 981 games of his career, all with the Rangers, and again was a very popular member of the club in their history. Okay, I did make a couple snide remarks about the Rangers trading for Nick Beverley, and when they got rid of Hatfield for him, I still think they could have got much more. But be that as it may, I'd say he was their third best defenseman this year, and played very well most of the season despite missing 17 games. He'd only play 9 more games for the Rangers, and was sent to the Stars, and that's why I think this trade might have been a mistake. And after brief stints in LA and Colorado, he retired at just 33 years old. However, after retiring from the game, from 1985 all the way to 2023, he spent that entire span in the NHL in various coaching, management, and scouting roles. John Bednarski was hit or miss this season, but clearly wasn't made for the Rangers or the NHL. He only played 6 more professional games, 5 for the Rangers, retiring from hockey in 1982 at just 30 years old. Larry Sacrock looked like he may finally break out this season. He was really just seemingly coming into his own before injuries ended his season. Sadly, he'd only played 2 more NHL games both for the Rangers and was in another game actually for the better part of a decade before retiring for good in Europe in 1989 at age 36. He's had various coaching and management roles overseas. And remember all the trouble they went to actually reacquire him? Yeah. Season veteran Doug Jarrett actually played very well when he arrived in New York and had a unbeaten streak early on this season, but after that was either injured, scratched, or just plain bad. He had played just 9 more NHL games, all with the Rangers, ending his career with a 40-game minor league stint, retiring after a somewhat underrated career, I'd say, at the age of 33. Minor league call-up Dave Maloney showed he had a lot of potential in his limited action and would win a spot on the main roster next season. He became a much welcome fixture for the Rangers going forward. But hey, look! Carl Vadnais was actually tied for 5th in the entire league with total goals on ice for a huge 168, shared with Denny Potvin of the New York Islanders, showing that he can make things happen with his mere presence out there. And he's in good company on this list to boot. It's also the 3rd straight year he has made this category. But he's also on the other side of the coin. His total goals on ice against was 166. Most in the league. The 4th time he has made this dubious list, the most of which is during his tenure with the Seals. It's actually the first time he's led the category, though. He and Leafs icon Boreas Salming are the only 2 on both lists this season. As you see, Ron Greshner, to no one's surprise, is on this list, finishing 7th with 135. But we'll end the defense on a happy note, as Vadnais was actually tied for 10th in the league on power play goals on ice for, with 57, along with Sabres megastar Gilbert Perreault, Flyers legend Bill Barber, and Islanders superstar Clark Gillies. As mentioned, Jean Rattel was tied for 7th with 59. And now to the goalies. The Rangers used a total of 4 different goaltenders this season. The primary request being new acquisition, JD, John Davidson, who became a folk hero in New York this season, and beloved among Rangers fans for his hard work ethic and never say die attitude. He had a record of 22, 28, and 5, which doesn't sound great, but considering the club he's on, it shows the workload he carried playing in 56 games, and actually might have been more games if he didn't suffer that leg injury, where his comeback from that shows his fight from adversity. His 3.97 goals against average, 80 save percentage, don't sound great, but make no mistake about it, his 3 shutouts were very well earned. He faced an unfair barrage of shots some nights, and sometimes was just downright outstanding. Dunk Wilson was the primary backup this season, and he wasn't that great. 5.9-3 record in 20 appearances, a rough 4.22 goals against average, a very bad 856 save percentage, no shutouts. Yeah, he won't be back next year. He was out with the Rangers, but oddly enough, had the best season of his career in Pittsburgh the following season. After 2 seasons there, he retired after a brief return to Vancouver in 1979, at just age 31. Rookie Doug Storied, I will say, was thrust into a position that he definitely should not have been in. He wasn't ready. He did, however, show a bit of promise and went 2-2-0 at 8 total appearances, mainly that game against the Scouts. He had a bad 5.27 goals against average and a 856 save percentage himself. Either way, he'll be with the Rangers for the foreseeable future as well, and would actually play in the NHL until 1987. And alas, it was the end of that legendary run for Eddie Giacomin in New York. After 12 seasons, he departed the team badly with an 0-3-1 record, a very bad 4.7 goals against average, and an atrociously awful 806 save percentage. And after 1 month was placed on waivers. They might as well at least try to get a bag of pucks out of it. Who can forget his emotional return to MSG as a member of the Red Wings? He spent the remainder of his career with Detroit, retiring in 1978 at age 39. And now we go to award season. The only Rangers who got votes are Park and Rattel. Both got votes for the Hart Trophy as League MVP, coming in 5th and 6th place respectively. Park was also a finalist for the Norris Trophy as top defenseman, coming in 2nd with 96 votes, the 6th time he was a finalist. But it actually wasn't Bobby Orr standing in his way for once. It was Islander Denny Potvin. Park was the first-team All-Star, however, for the 4th time in his career. Rattel, however, won the Lady Byng Trophy for excellence in sportsmanship for the 2nd time in his career, winning it with the Rangers back in 1972. But the Rangers didn't exactly walk away empty-handed. Yes! Rod Gilbert receives the Bill Masterton Trophy for perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to the game of hockey. Injuries early in his career could have ended it all, but he has made it this far and is at last recognized for it. He is the 2nd Ranger to win it in its short existence at this point. Rattel was the first back in '71. A huge honor for a great player and a man whose heart beats for the game day in and day out. But now the question remains, just who won that blockbuster trade? Well, the Bruins returned to being a powerhouse in the league and made it to the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row in '77 and '78. Lost both times, however, to the Montreal Canadiens. Rattel and Park both continue to be superstars for their new team. Rattel retired as a Bruin in 1981. Park stayed with the team till '83, mentoring young Ray Bourque, and ended his career with 2 seasons in Detroit. So, the Bruins win the trade? Yes. But so did the Rangers. The team began a rebuilding phase as they do miss the playoffs again in '77 and '78, but Espo and Vadnais continued to be assets to the team. John Ferguson was dismissed from his position as general manager in 1978, but actually made some really good decisions draft-wise for the team that actually helped the arrival of Freddie the Fog Shiro, the man who made the Flyers champions, and he changed everything in New York as he took a job with the Rangers in '78-'79 as both coach and GM, and the Rangers rebounded huge. They made a miracle run to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1979. Of course, they too lost the Habs. Espo retired as a Ranger as well. Vadnais stayed until '82 and played his final season with the Devils in New Jersey, retiring in '83. The Bruins weren't more dominant in this time frame. Rattel and Park did receive more accolades before their careers ended, as Espo's time as an award recipient and scoring domination forward were done. But the Bruins, did they fare better than the Rangers? You could say yes, in terms of overall aspects. But the bottom line here, nobody lost this trade. 6 members of this Rangers organization from this bad season are still inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Rod Gilbert would only play 2 more seasons as he began dealing with injuries and retired in 1978, and retired as the Rangers' all-time leading scorer when he hung up his skates, and as of 2025, still is. He, however, had to wait till his second year of eligibility to be enshrined into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1982. But before that, in 1979, he made history becoming the first Rangers player to have his number retired by the club. And a man who put a lot of faith into Gilbert in his career, Emile Francis, got a well-deserved induction into the Builders category that very same year in 1982. As indeed Francis, even after that, after his time with the Rangers that is, I should say, became GM of the Blues and GM of the Whalers, and while he had some of the same problems he'd faced in New York, he still did a lot of good for those 2 teams. 2 years later, Phil Esposito, however, was a no-brainer first ballot Hall of Famer in 1984. He retired in 1981, and while he was nearing 39 years old, injuries pretty much forced him out of the game. He was still productive by 1980. Jean Rotel, who also retired in 1981 and also had injury issues by the end, at 40, had to wait until his second year of eligibility, which to me is downright puzzling, in 1985, but he finally got his well-deserved enshrinement, and his number was finally retired by the Rangers in 2018. In 1987, Eddie Giacomin, waiting 7 years, finally got his just due in 1987, making the Hall, and became the second Rangers player in history to have his number retired. That was 2 years later in 1989. And last and definitely not least, Brad Park was a first ballot Hall of Famer, began his first year of eligibility in 1988, said to be one of the best defensemen of his era, with very little doubt. Now, some have made arguments for both Carl Vadnais, and many have made arguments for Rick Middleton. Make no mistake about it, Vadnais was a very good defenseman, but that's about as good as it gets, really. And there's nothing wrong with that. He's spent most of his career on terrible teams, but the thing is, even when you're on non-contending teams, you still have to have the right numbers and attributes to get in. And the fact is, even despite an excellent career, Vadnais never once in that career got votes for the Norris Trophy. Could it be he was overlooked? I could say perhaps, but the Seals were awful. He couldn't thrive, and yeah, he was great on the Bruins, but you're on a team with Bobby Orr. And his time at the Rangers, well, very good, still not great. He led the league in total goals on ice against, again in 1977. Too much just goes against him. But the argument for Rick Middleton is very valid, and I think he has a good possibility for a good argument. The Rangers, however, gave up on him after this season. Nice one, Fergie. And he became a superstar in Boston over 12 seasons, and becoming a part of those 77 and 78 teams that made the Cup final along with Rotel and Park. He won the Lady Byng in 1982, as well as he was a second-team All-Star that very same year. He was a superb two-way player and never got enough credit when it came to Selke votes. He recorded 988 career points in 1,005 games. Not quite a point a game, but pretty damn close, as he did deal with severe injuries late in his career and was forced to retire in 1988 at age 34. He reached 30 goals 7 straight times, 8 times overall in his career, but the problem is he gets drowned out in a statistically dominant era of forwards, despite being among the most competitive and complete forwards in the league. And some with even less accolades than him personally are in the Hall of Fame. Some also say it's his lack of Stanley Cups, as he did play in 3 finals, but never got himself a ring. But he was great on the power play and penalty kill. He was the consummate special teams player. He was a tremendous clutch scorer. He's in the top 10 all-time in shooting percentage. Yes, I can see the arguments against him too, okay. But to me, the positives slightly outweigh it. It's a far outside chance at this point, as he's been retired now for close to 40 years. But you never know, it might be possible one day. And 3 of the members of that blockbuster trade in 2017 were named to the NHL's top 100 players of all time, and I'm pretty sure you can guess who that was. Phil Esposito, Jean Rotel, and Brad Park all make the cut. However, some say Rod Gilbert was grossly overlooked in this regard. And at last, the 50th anniversary of the Rangers definitely was not glorious. However, there were glorious moments. That monster trade, the end of the Emile Francis era, and the drama around Eddie Giacomin, well, dramatic, yes, but still memorable. And of course, Vickers' 7 points in one game made this team all worth talking about. And that indeed brings us to an end of our look at the 1975-76 New York Rangers. Indeed, to honor their 100th anniversaries, I'll be looking at a season from both the Hawks and the Red Wings in the future, so stay tuned. But I'm still open to comments and suggestions for other videos. Leave them below. Like and share the video, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'll see ya.